The school bell rings, a sound that usually signals the joy of lunch, but today it carries a heavy weight. A summons to the rooftop tomorrow hangs over the day like a dark cloud, feeling less like an invitation and more like a signal of execution. She tries to focus on the biology lecture about the divisions of the brain, but her mind is elsewhere. The complex diagrams of the cerebrum, cerebellum, and brainstem blur as her stomach begins to rumble, drowning out the teacher's explanation of the yellow highlighted sections. Beside her, her friend notices the distraction as the teacher prepares to wrap up the lesson for the day. It is only 11:50, but the anticipation of her beloved meal is becoming unbearable, making it impossible for her to think of anything other than food. Finally, the wait is over. With a look of pure determination and joy, she pulls her heavy bento box onto the desk, her eyes sparkling at the prospect of the feast within. The lid comes off with a satisfying click, revealing a meticulously packed meal that looks absolutely divine. She hesitates for a moment, overwhelmed by the delicious options before her, wondering where she should even begin. She starts with the lighter fare, savoring every bite of what she considers her blissful daily ritual. For Shizuko Omori, lunch is the highlight of the day, a time to recharge and enjoy the simple pleasure of eating, though the peace of this moment feels strangely fragile. However, that peace is shattered when she feels a heavy, oppressive gaze. Across the room, the fearsome Ajura is glaring directly at her, his eyes narrowed in a terrifying scowl that sends a chill down her spine. He has been maintaining this terrifying vigil for 3 days now, ever since the seating arrangements were shuffled. She realizes with a sinking heart that this isn't just a coincidence or her imagination. He is deliberately targeting her with his silent intimidation. He is a figure of dread within the school walls, a name that carries weight and a presence that commands silence. Akira Kuro's sits with a deliberate, imposing stillness, his gaze fixed forward with an intensity that seems to pierce through anyone unfortunate enough to cross his path. His reputation was forged in violence. Born from a legendary encounter where he single-handedly dismantled the top delinquents of a neighboring town during his junior high years. This display of raw power earned him the moniker Ajura, a title that has followed him ever since, leaving Shizuka to wonder in silent terror if she has somehow drawn the ire of such a formidable individual. Despite the looming threat, the daily rhythm of school life continues, and Shizuka finds herself the target of a different kind of attention during lunch. A classmate, Takamine, gestures towards Shizuka's substantial bento, jokingly suggesting she change her name to reflect her massive appetite, while others join in the lighthearted mockery. She tries to laugh along with the group, even as Takamine leans in to ask if the teasing has truly hurt her feelings. The air is thick with the casual cruelty of high school social dynamics, but Shizuka maintains her gentle smile, masking whatever discomfort she might feel. Nearby, the atmosphere remains heavy as the Ajura himself continues his silent vigil, his presence a dark cloud over the cafeteria. Shizuka focuses on her meal, trying to find solace in the taste of the pork cutlets, even as she makes a self-deprecating joke to herself about the irony of her meal. The tension finally snaps when he abruptly stands, his chair scraping harshly against the floor as he commands the group to shut up. He storms away without another word, leaving the students in a state of stunned silence, convinced that their trivial chatter has finally pushed the school's most dangerous student past his limit. Once the commotion dies down and she is left to her own thoughts, Shizuka returns to the simple comfort of her food. She reflects on how, no matter how stressful or frightening the day becomes, the act of eating provides a sense of contentment that anchors her. She finishes every last morsel, staring down at the empty containers of her bento box. To her, the joy of the meal outweighs any concerns about the eventual consequences or the labels others might place upon her. Later that afternoon, the focus shifts from the cafeteria to the quiet hallway outside the infirmary. A voice calls out for Shizuko Omori, signaling that it is time for her scheduled consultation with the school physician. She enters the sterile room with a polite greeting, finding the doctor waiting for her. He gestures toward a chair with a professional, yet welcoming demeanor, inviting her to sit so they can begin the examination. He begins the consultation by noting that a little over a month has passed since the start of the second year of high school. He asks if there have been any changes or anything bothering her lately. As he speaks, memories of recent teasing flash through her mind. Her classmates had joked about her name, suggesting she change it to Dekamori because of her large appetite, a comment that had clearly left a mark. Despite those lingering thoughts, she quickly dismisses any concerns, claiming there are no issues worth mentioning. He pauses, looking at her through his glasses, and asks if she is absolutely sure. He then shifts the topic, observing that she seems to truly enjoy her meals. This catches her off guard, and she wonders how he could know. He explains that he occasionally sees her from outside the classroom during lunch breaks. Blushing slightly, she admits that her food is simply too tasty and her appetite has indeed increased lately. This admission prompts him to share a curious perspective on life and nutrition. He begins a mental calculation, explaining that if a person lives 80 years and eats 3 meals a day, they will consume approximately 88,000 meals in their lifetime. He continues his lecture, adjusting the figure to a more realistic 70 to 80,000 meals to maintain health. He leans forward, emphasizing that while the number is high, it represents a significant portion of one's existence. She considers the weight of that number, 80,000, and finds it quite substantial. He watches her reaction closely, asking if that amount feels like a lot to her. He elaborates on his point, noting that because people eat so many meals one after another, the real importance lies in whether that time spent eating is fulfilling or not. She takes a moment to process this philosophical take on a daily routine, Seeing that the message has landed, he decides they can leave the consultation at that for the day. She stands up and thanks him before sliding the door open to leave. As she walks down the hallway, the thought of those 80,000 meals continues to echo in her mind. She clutches her stomach, a strange emptiness lingering despite the bento she finished earlier. It seems her appetite is growing restless, leaving her unsatisfied even after a full meal. Later that afternoon, she is at her part-time job at a bookstore. The manager asks if she can handle organizing the magazines on the shelves, and she readily agrees to the task. While she works, a young woman approaches, tentatively asking for assistance. She responds with a bright, helpful smile, setting the customer at ease as she confirms her willingness to help. Soon after, a man inquires about the latest issue of a cooking magazine called Today's Obanzai. She confirms they have it in stock and heads toward the back of the store to retrieve a copy for him. Scanning the rows, she quickly spots the correct title tucked away on a shelf. She reaches for it, pleased to have found the specific magazine so efficiently. As she turns back with the magazine, she comes face to face with a familiar, intimidating figure. In her shock, the name Azura-kun slips from her lips before she can stop herself, and his expression immediately darkens at the mention of the nickname. He glares at her with terrifying intensity, his brow furrowed in a menacing scowl. She freezes, her heart racing as the realization hits her that they aren't nearly close enough for such a nickname, and he clearly took offense to her familiarity. Overwhelmed by fear, she tries to bolt, but he lunges forward, his hand snapping out to catch her. He shouts for her to stop and not to run away, his voice booming through the quiet aisles as she desperately tries to escape his reach. She winces, squeezing her eyes shut and bracing for a physical blow. The sheer force of his presence and the anger in his voice make her certain that he is about to strike her. Instead of a strike, he firmly grips her arm to keep her from fleeing. Nearby shoppers begin to whisper in alarm, wondering if he is a shoplifter or a violent criminal, and debating whether they should notify the police. He looms over her, his shadow casting a dark pall over the bookstore aisle. With a low, menacing growl, he issues a command for her to meet him on the school rooftop during tomorrow's lunch break, punctuating the demand with a chilling "or else" that leaves her trembling in place. As he strides away, the tension in the air finally snaps, and the concerned bystanders immediately swarm the shaken girl. The manager and customers press in, their faces etched with worry as they ask if she is unharmed and recount the frightening sight of the blonde, mean-looking boy who had been cornering her. She quickly tries to downplay the encounter, forcing a shaky smile as she explains to the manager that the boy was simply looking for a magazine. She claims her reaction was merely a moment of unnecessary panic, though the manager remains skeptical, musing over the reputation of the youth who just departed. The next morning, the bright sunlight of a new day does little to ease her inner turmoil as she walks to school with her companions. When they question why she isn't carrying her signature bento, she fabricates an excuse about meeting other friends at the cafeteria, unable to voice the terrifying reality of the rooftop meeting that awaits her. Beneath her polite, practiced smile, a frantic internal monologue screams the truth she cannot share. She is the only daughter of her family, and yet she has somehow caught the lethal attention of the most notorious delinquent in the entire school. At the school gates, the mundane rhythms of student life continue, with classmates exchanging cheerful greetings and one student even jokingly addressing a faculty member as Daddy Teach as they filter into the building. Near the entrance, the peace is shattered when a teacher stops the blonde youth to berate him for his non-conforming hairstyle. He refuses to back down, defiantly arguing that the school rules don't explicitly forbid his look and that he should have the freedom to choose his own style. The confrontation escalates as the teacher rants about the school's reputation being tarnished by trash like him, only to be met with a blunt, disrespectful dismissal. Watching the exchange from a distance, she feels a cold knot of dread tighten in her stomach, wondering if she will even survive the day. The morning classes pass in a blur of anxiety until the chime finally signals the start of the lunch hour. The classroom erupts into the usual chaotic energy of hungry students, a stark contrast to the heavy silence settling over her. Her friends gather around, immediately noticing that she isn't touching her food. They tease her about the lack of her usual massive bento, jokingly suggesting that a miracle like a pig refusing to eat must mean it's going to snow, while she sits in a daze, her mind already on the rooftop. She hesitates at the threshold of the rooftop, her heart hammering against her ribs as she imagines the worst-case scenario. With a trembling hand, she pushes the door open, half expecting a scene of carnage to greet her. Standing before her is the school's most feared delinquent, his imposing silhouette framed against the open sky. He stares her down with a piercing gaze, his hands shoved deep into his pockets, radiating an aura of pure intimidation that makes her blood run cold. As he begins to close the distance, she squeezes her eyes shut and braces for a physical blow. The sound of his heavy footsteps echoes in her ears, and she wonders if this is the moment her luck finally runs out. Instead of the expected strike, the delinquent suddenly bows low, thrusting a decorative paper bag toward her with desperate intensity. He pleads with her to accept the offering and, more importantly, to remain silent about what she witnessed. She stares at the bag in utter bewilderment, her fear momentarily replaced by confusion. When she asks for clarification on what exactly she is supposed to keep secret, he becomes visibly agitated. He snaps at her to keep her voice down, his face flushing with a mixture of anger and deep embarrassment. He brings up the incident at the bookstore, revealing his desperate need to hide his interest in cooking and the specific magazine he was trying to buy from his peers. While she ponders the strange contents of the bag, he continues to insist that she simply take the gift and forget the whole ordeal. He seems less like a threat now and more like a boy caught in a compromising position. Upon peering inside, she lets out a gasp of genuine surprise at the sight of an exquisitely arranged bento. The colors and textures of the food are professional in quality, a stark contrast to the rough exterior of the man who gave it to her. She marvels at the elaborate meal, assuming he went through the trouble of purchasing such a fancy gift just for her. He quickly dismisses the idea, clarifying that the food was prepared at home rather than bought from a shop. He looks away, his scowl returning as she praises his parents' culinary skills. He corrects her once more, the implication hanging in the air that he was the one who meticulously prepared the meal himself. He stands tall, thumb pointed at his chest as he boldly declares that he was the one who prepared the meal. Shizuka can only stare in disbelief, a soft gasp escaping her lips as she tries to process the impossible claim. Because of this shocking revelation, she begins to stammer, her mind racing as she looks between the intimidating delinquent and the delicate bento. He cuts through her confusion, gruffly ordering her to sit down and eat already, dismissing her disbelief with a sharp command. Moments later, she steals a glance at him through the tense silence, searching for any sign of a joke, while he watches her with a piercing, expectant gaze that makes her heart race. Resigning herself to the situation, she sits beside him on the concrete ledge and clutches the bento box. With a deep breath and the thought that she has nothing left to lose, she offers a quiet word of thanks before preparing to take the first bite. As she looks down, the sheer quality of the meal strikes her again. It is a perfectly arranged assortment that seems far too refined for someone with his reputation. She carefully lifts a piece of rolled omelet with her chopsticks, marveling at its flawless, uniform shape. It seems impossible that his large, rough hands could have crafted something so delicate. With a hesitant motion, she finally takes a bite, her eyes widening as the flavors hit her tongue. She finds the taste to be an immediate revelation and can't help but beam with pure delight, exclaiming that it is absolutely delicious. She describes how the omelet seems to melt the moment it touches her mouth, followed by the savory broth from the mixed rice that oozes out with every chew. She continues to be amazed by the complexity of the dish, from the saltiness of the salmon to the sweetness of the edamame, and finds herself wanting to devour the entire meal without a second thought. She tentatively takes a bite of the rolled omelet, her eyes widening at the fluffy, creamy texture. Despite her enjoyment, she can't help but notice his intense, piercing gaze fixed on her, making her wonder if she's inadvertently offended him. With a nervous stutter, she asks for the secret behind such a perfect dish. He leans back, explaining with a gruff matter-of-factness that the secret lies in the generous amount of broth he incorporated. As he describes the process of rolling the eggs in a bamboo mat while they are still hot, she listens in stunned silence, her mind racing to process such professional culinary techniques coming from him. Continuing his explanation, he gestures as if holding a sushi mat, noting that the heat allows the shape to set perfectly. She finds herself nodding along, realizing the logic behind his method, even as the contrast between his menacing aura and his delicate cooking skills grows more pronounced. The young woman moves on to the simmered dish, finding it equally exquisite and bursting with flavor. While she finds the intensity of his voice somewhat unsettling, the sheer quality of the meal overwhelms her senses, leaving her in a state of pure culinary bliss. Seeing her reaction, he points toward a golden brown croquette, his expression sharpening with a predatory grin as he identifies it as ground meat. He encourages her to try it, his intense demeanor making the simple suggestion feel like a challenge. She takes a bite and is immediately struck by another wave of disbelief at the incredible flavor. As she stares at the half-eaten morsel in shock, he watches her closely, his sharp eyes tracking every nuance of her reaction. Because the texture is so remarkably crispy, she is surprised to learn that the dish wasn't actually deep-fried. She looks up at him, her confusion evident as she tries to reconcile the crunch with the lack of heavy oil. The young man explains that deep frying in the morning is far too much trouble, so he opts for an oven-baked method instead. By mixing a bit of oil directly into the breadcrumbs before coating the patties, he achieves the same satisfying crunch without the mess of a fryer. As she savors the juicy meat, she realizes that his attention to detail extends even to the grind of the protein. He mentions almost casually that he grinds the meat coarsely himself to ensure a more substantial, meaty texture that stands up to the baking process. This final revelation leaves her completely floored, her eyes wide as she repeats his words in disbelief. He simply smirks, reaffirming his preference for the superior quality of freshly ground meat while she struggles to comprehend the depth of his dedication to his craft. He grins with a predatory intensity, explaining that the physical act of beating and smashing ingredients serves as a perfect stress reliever. Beside him, the young woman listens with a forced smile, her mind racing as she tries to reconcile his violent language with the delicate culinary skills he just described. He sits nearby, his own container already empty, while she clasps her hands together in gratitude, praising the delicious food. He notes with blunt satisfaction that he finished every bite in record time, seemingly pleased by her reaction. He remains silent as this quiet moment of shared satisfaction causes her to steal a glance at him, her previous assumptions crumbling as she realizes there is a surprising depth to the boy sitting before her, far beyond his reputation as a scary person. She watches as he stands to depart, casting a final, stern warning over his shoulder for her to keep the existence of his cookbook a secret. She quickly stammers her agreement, hoping this encounter will finally allow him to settle down and leave her in peace. However, he stops and turns back, his eyes narrowing with a sudden, sharp intensity that demands her full attention. After confirming she truly understands the stakes, he issues a blunt command for her to return to this very spot on the rooftop the following day. The unexpected invitation leaves her frozen in place, her mouth agape as she watches his broad back, unable to process the sudden turn the conversation has taken. She listens as he clarifies his terms, explaining that he will continue to provide her with handmade bentos as a fair trade for her continued silence. She watches him, utterly bewildered, wondering if he completely misunderstood her earlier promise of secrecy. He ignores her attempt to interject, cutting her off by slamming his hand against the chain-link fence with a startling metallic clang when she insists she would never betray his secret regardless of the food. He looks back at her with a gaze that brooks no further argument, telling her to simply shut up and follow his lead. Terrified by the sudden display of force, she snaps into a rigid salute, her voice trembling as she agrees to his demands. As he walks away, she is left alone with her thoughts, realizing that this strange arrangement marks the beginning of a very peculiar and unexpected new chapter in her life. She sat in stunned silence on the rooftop, her gaze fixed on the retreating figure of the most notorious delinquent in the entire town. His final command echoed in her mind, a demand that she prepare a bento for him, cementing a bizarre and terrifying new reality in her school life. A hand slams a bento box onto the table with a sharp thud, accompanied by a gruff command to eat. In response to the sudden gesture, the young girl stares up with wide, uncertain eyes, while the boy looms over her with a fierce, unwavering intensity. She tentatively accepts the offering, whispering a soft word of gratitude before he turns away in silence. As the days pass, this strange arrangement continues. He provides a meticulously prepared meal each afternoon to ensure her silence regarding his secret. She realizes that despite his intimidating reputation, he hasn't breathed a word of their encounter to anyone else. He snaps her out of her thoughts, urging her to stop stalling and begin her meal. She lifts the lid, and her eyes sparkle at the sight of the vibrant, expertly arranged contents within the box. Taking a generous spoonful, she is immediately struck by the rich, inviting scent of ketchup. She finds the flavor unlike anything she has ever tasted, leading her to wonder how he managed to keep the rice so perfectly textured and light. He begins to explain his technique, detailing how he first stir-fries the base ingredients before incorporating the butter and sauce. He continues his lecture, explaining that the key is to reduce the moisture from the ketchup against the side of the pan before finally adding the rice. She listens intently, captivated by his unexpected expertise. Looking at his stern profile, she realizes that while his manner is undeniably blunt, he possesses a surprising depth and a willingness to share his knowledge when asked. He watches as she examines the rolled omelet, her brow furrowing at the subtle change in seasoning. She notes that this batch feels different from the usual, her curiosity piqued by the unexpected flavor profile. As she takes another bite, her eyes widen in surprise at the discovery of cheese hidden within the egg. The realization hits her instantly, a small gasp escaping her lips as she identifies the secret ingredient. The molten cheese stretches from the center, a gooey surprise that catches her completely off guard. Just when she had settled into the expectation of a simple, sweet rolled omelet, the savory core reveals itself. She is momentarily speechless, her face lighting up as the complex flavors dance on her tongue. It is a sensation unlike any she has experienced before, a perfect, harmonious blend of sweet and salty that leaves her reeling. Observing her reaction, he asks if she would have preferred a saltier version of the dish. She quickly clarifies that it isn't that at all. She simply had no idea such a pairing could work so well, admitting her delightful ignorance of the culinary combination. Her joy overflows into a radiant smile, her eyes sparkling with genuine admiration for the meal. She declares the dish to be nothing short of incredible, jokingly suggesting it is worthy of a Nobel Peace Prize for the harmony it brings to her palate. The mention of such a prestigious award leaves him momentarily stunned, his stoic expression faltering as he processes her hyperbolic praise. He stares at her, his mind seemingly stuck on the absurdity of the comparison. He eventually finds his voice, bluntly telling her that she is exaggerating the quality of the simple snack. His dismissal catches her by surprise, leaving her blinking in confusion at his lack of ego. He explains the simplicity of the technique, noting that it is merely string cheese that melts perfectly when heated. As they sit together on the roof, she finds herself wondering if she caught a glimpse of a rare smile on his face, or if it was just her imagination. She looks down at the beautifully prepared food, reflecting on the effort and creativity he pours into every single menu. Despite his casual attitude, she is deeply impressed by his dedication, while he remains lost in his own quiet thoughts. He has prepared a dish that looks like high-end Genovese pasta, leaving her wide-eyed with wonder. She can hardly believe such a sophisticated meal is sitting in her bento box, looking as if it were served at a fancy restaurant. Upon closer inspection, she realizes the pasta is actually a clever substitute, enoki mushrooms. The discovery of this healthy, flavorful twist leaves her even more impressed by his ingenuity and culinary creativity. Taking a bite, she is overwhelmed by the savoriness of the mushrooms perfectly complemented by the fresh flavor of the basil sauce. It is, in her mind, an absolute masterpiece of skill and taste. She voices her amazement, questioning how he could possibly whip up such a complex and delicious dish in a mere 3 minutes. He remains silent, his expression unreadable as he absorbs her genuine praise. After finishing the meal, she clasps her hands together in a gesture of deep gratitude, acknowledging that his cooking was once again a resounding success. He sits beside her, seemingly indifferent to the high praise, but present nonetheless. He breaks the silence by bluntly pointing out the mess she has made around her mouth while eating. The sudden observation catches her off guard, her cheeks flushing with a hint of embarrassment at her lack of composure. Before she can react, he produces a wet towel and offers it to her with a steady hand. She is struck by his unexpected thoughtfulness, a small thank you escaping her lips as she accepts the kind gesture. As she continues to eat, he simply sits there, his gaze fixed on her without saying a word. She has noticed this pattern over the last few days. He seems content to just watch her enjoy the food he prepared, doing nothing else in particular. This realization brings a wave of guilt over her, as she considers the immense effort he puts into these delicious meals every single day just for her benefit, making her feel indebted to his kindness. She eventually tells him directly how much she appreciates the quality of his bento, prompting him to explain his method. He reveals that he intentionally uses larger, firmer ingredients to ensure the meal is satisfying despite a smaller portion, as the extra chewing leaves the eater feeling full. He leans in, his expression stern as he imparts a fundamental truth. Above all else, one must maintain balance. Shiraishi listens intently, appearing small beside his intense focus as he emphasizes the importance of nutritional harmony. Turning his attention to a classmate's lunch, he questions Amori about her self-made bento, pointing out that a reliance on deep-fried foods lacks essential nutrients. He reflects on his own past mistakes, admitting that he once packed only what he liked, resulting in a monochromatic, brown meal that offered little more than empty calories. Inspired by the conversation, Shiraishi shares her own culinary beginnings, explaining how she took up the spatula when her mother fell ill the previous winter. She describes the process of using leftovers to create her own meals, a habit that quickly evolved from necessity into a genuine hobby. She lets out a cheerful laugh, admitting that her motivation stems from a lifelong love of eating. He watches her closely, his curiosity piqued as he asks if her appetite ever truly feels satisfied. Continuing her story, she mentions that her father has an even larger appetite than her own, and that her mother's love for cooking ensures their home is always filled with a variety of dishes. The thought of her family's dining table leaves him momentarily stunned, his mind racing as he tries to imagine someone with a greater capacity for food than the girl sitting before him. He can hardly believe that she isn't the biggest eater in her household. She beams with pure joy, declaring that she is at her absolute happiest while eating. He remains silent, his gaze fixed on her as they sit together against the school's rooftop fence, the weight of her simple honesty sinking in. As the wind brushes past them, she reflects on a time when the only sense of contentment came from a stomach filled to the point of bursting. Breaking the silence, he tells her firmly that she is expected to return the following day for another meal. The invitation leaves her stunned, a new realization dawning on her as she watches him begin to walk away. She finds it strange that despite eating in moderation, the nagging feeling of dissatisfaction that usually haunts her is nowhere to be found. Watching his retreating figure, she contemplates the mysterious power of a meal prepared with such careful balance. Her thoughts drift toward the future, already wondering what kind of bento awaits her tomorrow and if it will bring this same sense of peace. She had reached a sudden realization after 2 weeks of this routine, leading to a confrontation that left him reeling in disbelief. He couldn't fathom the words she had just spoken, his face contorted in a mix of shock and indignation at the suggestion that she could no longer accept his meals. In the face of his intense reaction, she immediately began to stammer out an apology, bowing her head in a desperate attempt to clarify her intentions. She hadn't meant to offend him. In truth, she had come to cherish those daily lunches, but a growing sense of unease had forced her hand. Her unease stemmed from a crushing weight of guilt that had finally reached its breaking point. She felt it was wrong to rely so heavily on someone who wasn't even family, realizing that her passive acceptance of his kindness was becoming a burden she could no longer ignore. She had been struck by the reality of the situation during a recent trip to the market, where the sight of a mounting total on the register served as a harsh wake-up call. Seeing the cost of simple ingredients made her realize that the meals he provided were far from free, representing a significant financial commitment. Moments later, she began calculating the sheer scale of his generosity over the past fortnight. 10 full meals required a staggering amount of food, a fact that had somehow eluded her until the cold numbers of the grocery bill forced her to confront the truth. As she pondered the cost, his lunches were clearly a far cry from the simple, monochromatic meals she was used to. The vibrant variety and high-quality ingredients in his containers clearly cost far more than the basic items she saw in the store baskets, highlighting the disparity between his effort and her own. Beyond the money, she finally visualized the invisible costs, the raw energy, the precious time, and the meticulous effort he poured into every dish. The weight of this realization became so overwhelming that she couldn't help but cry out, unable to let this lopsided arrangement continue for another day. As she finished her outburst, he listened to her frantic explanation with a stoic expression, though a hint of confusion lingered in his eyes. He noted how abruptly she had made the request to stop, clearly trying to process the sudden shift in their dynamic. In response, he leaned back and explained that the burden wasn't nearly as heavy as she imagined. Since he was already preparing portions for himself and his younger sister, adding a third serving for her was a negligible increase in work, making her concerns seem almost trivial to him. While he defended his position, she was caught off guard by the mention of a sibling, her eyes widening as she tried to reconcile his tough exterior with the image of a caring older brother. Despite his defensive retort, she found the idea surprisingly fitting, seeing a new side to the disciplined chef standing before her. She inquired about the age of his younger sister, learning that the girl was 3 years his junior and currently in her 2nd year of middle school. This revelation seemed to soften her perception of Kuro's, as she noted how such a responsibility explained his surprisingly caring nature. A playful giggle escaped her as she wondered aloud if the girl called him by an affectionate sibling title, which immediately drew a sharp, defensive retort from him. However, the lighthearted mood shifted instantly when he bluntly revealed the somber reality that they no longer had a mother. He explained that their mother had passed away 3 years prior due to illness, leaving a void in their household. With their father constantly occupied by work, he and his sister were left to subsist on a repetitive diet of packaged meals from convenience stores and supermarkets. The young girl eventually reached a breaking point, returning home one day in tears. She had been carrying the same meager bento as her older brother, a simple rice ball and a few store-bought sides, which had become a source of deep distress for her. Cruel classmates had targeted her, mocking the simplicity of her meals and attributing it to her status as a child of a single-parent household. Recalling this, his voice grew cold with a lingering resentment toward those who would judge a person's entire character or family life based on the contents of a single lunch. Determined to ensure his sister would never have to weep over a meal again, he made the pivotal decision to master the art of cooking. He dedicated himself to the craft, standing by her side in the kitchen to provide the warmth and nourishment their home had been lacking. She listened in silence, her expression softening with a profound sense of empathy as he admitted that the journey hadn't been easy. He confessed to making countless mistakes in the beginning, often getting frustrated when his efforts from scratch yielded no results. Despite the initial struggles, he eventually found a sense of peace in the process, realizing that the act of cooking wasn't as burdensome as he once thought. He leaned back with a more relaxed posture, acknowledging that he had finally learned how to balance the effort and find enjoyment in the task. He looked her directly in the eye, his expression firm as he commanded her to simply enjoy the food he prepared without overthinking the labor involved. He insisted that his efforts were a choice, but he offered one final condition to settle the matter between them, demanding she stop worrying about the effort and just eat. She eagerly accepted his terms, thrusting an envelope of food money toward him with a determined smile, insisting that she couldn't live with herself otherwise. Though he called her stubborn and sighed at her persistence, he finally accepted the payment, bringing a sense of mutual understanding and relief to their shared routine as they both smiled. They both stared down at the meticulously prepared bento, where a rice ball lion with a sunflower mane stares back. The level of detail is staggering, a testament to the effort poured into the meal. Seeing the adorable creation, her eyes light up with pure, unadulterated joy. She can't help but exclaim how incredibly cute the edible lion is. Despite the praise, he looks away with a dismissive grunt, claiming he isn't actually into this sort of thing and only made it because his sister was practically begging him. She quietly observes that the lion's face actually bears a striking resemblance to his own stoic expression. He then produces a pair of kitchen scissors, his gaze turning sharp and focused as he explains that such tools make quick work of intricate tasks. She is impressed by his craftiness, noting how skillfully he handles the implements. He continues his explanation with growing enthusiasm, detailing how scissors can cut through meat, vegetables, or fish with ease. He points out the efficiency of cutting ingredients directly into the frying pan, which eliminates the need for a cutting board and reduces the burden of washing dishes when time is short. As he speaks, she watches him intently, struck by how vibrant and passionate he sounds when discussing his culinary techniques. She finally voices her observation, asking him directly if he truly does enjoy cooking. The question catches him off guard, leaving him momentarily speechless. She clarifies, explaining that while he might deny it, he seems incredibly lively whenever the topic of cooking comes up. He sits in silence, processing the idea that his hidden passion might be so visible to others. With a warm, sincere smile, she tells him that people like her and his sister, who simply love to eat, are made happy by his efforts. She expresses a deep sense of respect for his ability to provide such joy through his craft. He remains quiet, his gaze drifting to the side as her words sink in. The usual wall of indifference seems to have thinned, leaving him in a rare moment of contemplative silence. He insists on absolute secrecy, urging her to keep his culinary talents a secret from the rest of the school, while she hesitates to disturb the adorable bear-shaped meal he meticulously prepared. She finds it almost painful to eat something so cute, but he dismisses her concerns, telling her to just eat already. Despite her initial reluctance, she takes a bite and is immediately overcome by the delicious flavor, her face lighting up with pure, unadulterated joy. Seeing her enthusiastic reaction, he lets out a rare, genuine laugh, noting that her lack of hesitation now contradicts her earlier sentiment about the food being too cute to eat. He mentions that he had heard about her from his little sister, Omi. As he speaks, she notices a profound change in his expression. The usual intensity and sternness in his eyes have softened into a gaze that is remarkably gentle. She eventually finishes the meal with a satisfied sigh, offering her sincere thanks for the food while he looks on, appearing quietly content with her appreciation. He then explains that the bento was specifically prepared as a gesture of gratitude for her keeping her mouth shut about his secret book, handing the empty container back to her. Unexpectedly, he extends an invitation, asking if she would also like to continue meeting and eating together in this secluded spot starting the following day. This sudden proposal leaves her momentarily stunned, her mind racing as she tries to process this new, inviting side of the boy everyone else fears. She voices her concern, wondering aloud if her presence wouldn't be a burden or make him feel uncomfortable, but he seems genuinely puzzled by her hesitation, asking if she is sure about that. With a radiant smile, she clarifies that being watched from afar is far more awkward than simply sharing a meal together, effectively accepting his offer and cementing their new arrangement. She had accepted his offer, And as he looked away, he realized that before he even knew it, these small moments they shared on the rooftop had begun to mean something more. He simply agreed, his voice steady despite the internal shift. He watched her walk away, the realization deepening that these brief encounters had become something he couldn't live without. As she waved a cheerful goodbye and promised to see him tomorrow, he stood there, the weight of their new routine settling over him. The story of the pork soup's lament begins with a quiet moment between two unlikely companions as they pore over the pages of a magazine. As the calendar turns to June, the rising heat of the season begins to weigh heavily on the young student sitting at her desk. She reflects on how the humid weather is particularly unkind to those with her softer build, her expression clouded with a quiet melancholy. Deciding to seek refuge, she pushes back her chair and announces her departure for the rooftop, eager to finally enjoy the lunch she has been anticipating all morning. However, her path is blocked by a sharp-tongued classmate who immediately begins to pry into her personal habits. The girl with the high ponytail leans in close, questioning the absence of her usual bento and mocking her recent tendency to keep to herself. She quickly stammers out an excuse about oversleeping and needing to visit the school store before hurrying away. Behind her, the other girl watches with a cold, predatory gaze, whispering a cruel insult about her weight that lingers in the air. The silence that follows is heavy as the bully remains still, her eyes fixed on the retreating figure of her target. Later, on the secluded rooftop, the girl finds a moment of peace alongside a companion who has been observing the friction from afar. As they sit together with their food, he bluntly asks why she refuses to stand up for herself against the constant harassment. She offers a small, resigned smile, explaining that she simply wishes to avoid any unnecessary conflict or trouble. With a hint of curiosity, she asks if he had been watching the confrontation in the classroom earlier. He looks away, his mind drifting back to past events as he questions her about a similar situation involving her sister's bento. The girl looks down, admitting that she feels there is little she can do about the names people call her, given her own self-perception. He continues his thought, noting that while a homemade meal usually silences most critics, the true ringleaders of the bullying are rarely so easily deterred. She listens in silence, the weight of his words adding to the complexity of her situation. She listens as he recounts a past confrontation, explaining how he once dealt with a group of bullies who were targeting elementary school children. Even when they tried to intimidate him by mentioning their older brother's reputations, he remained completely unfazed. He recalls the moment he stood his ground against a boy claiming his brother was the head honcho of the area. Without a hint of fear, he had challenged the boy to bring his brother along if he truly wanted to settle the score. The situation eventually escalated when the older brother arrived with a group of followers, but he dismisses the entire event as being far less significant than the rumors suggested. To him, it was simply a matter that needed to be resolved. Hearing this, she connects the dots, realizing that the story he just shared was the origin of the legendary Azura incident she had heard whispered about in the school hallways. She muses that while the event gave birth to his fearsome reputation, it actually proved he was a deeply compassionate person who was willing to fight for those who couldn't defend themselves. He seems slightly uncomfortable with the praise, asking if she is finally satisfied with his explanation. He scoffs at the idea of being overly caring, quickly shifting the conversation away from his past and back to the present moment. Taking a large bite of the bagel she provided, he admits that despite his usual dislike for their texture, this particular one is surprisingly delicious. He offers a culinary tip, noting that bagels are significantly improved when sliced in half and thoroughly toasted to a golden brown, which enhances their flavor. The conversation turns toward their upcoming home economics class, where they are scheduled to prepare pork soup, a prospect they both seem to find agreeable. He decides to pack a lighter bento for the next day to complement the soup they will make in class, leaving her beaming with anticipation for the meal he will prepare. She sits beside the man who once harassed her, both of them enjoying their snacks. Her anticipation for the upcoming meal is palpable as she expresses her excitement, while he seems surprisingly relaxed in her presence. The following day, she stands in the home economics classroom, her gaze drifting toward the door. The boy with the swept-back hair is nowhere to be found, a rare occurrence that leaves her wondering if he has fallen ill. Nearby, her classmates are already at work, their conversation turning toward a sighting of the school's most notorious figure. As the rhythmic sound of a knife hitting the cutting board fills the room, one of the boys urges his friend to stop stalling and speak plainly. The air is thick with the scent of fresh vegetables and the weight of an untold secret. He finally drops the bombshell, claiming to have seen their stoic classmate in the company of the Red Demon of Kasu High. The revelation sends a jolt through the room, leaving the girl frozen in disbelief as she processes the idea of such an unlikely alliance. Because of this news, her focus wavers as she continues her prep work. She tries to reassure herself that he can handle a knife well enough, but the nagging thought of what might have transpired between him and that demon keeps her mind racing. Despite the distractions, the task is eventually completed, and a steaming bowl of pork soup is presented. The rich broth and hearty ingredients shimmer under the kitchen lights, a testament to their collective effort. They gather around the finished dish, their stomachs growling in anticipation. While one is eager to dig in immediately, the other reminds him of the proper protocol. The instructor must receive the first portion. Seeing an opportunity to be useful, she volunteers to deliver the bowl to the teacher. She carefully lifts the tray, her movements deliberate as she prepares to navigate the busy classroom. Moments later, disaster strikes. Her foot catches on an unseen obstacle, and the world tilts. A sharp cry escapes her as she tumbles forward, the tray slipping from her grasp and the precious soup cascading toward the floor. She remains sprawled on the ground, staring in horror at the mess. The work of art she worked so hard on is now nothing more than a stain on the linoleum, and her heart sinks as she realizes the magnitude of her clumsy mistake while her friend looks on from a distance. Omori is surrounded by her classmates as the chaos of the accident subsides. Takamine apologizes, claiming her hands just slipped, while Shiraishi frets over the possibility of a scar, urging her to cool the burn immediately. As the mess is cleared, Ueno reassures her that everything is fine and to focus on her hand, but she remains overwhelmed with guilt, apologizing to everyone for ruining the class project. A row of empty beds in the school infirmary waits in silence, providing a stark contrast to the bustling classroom left behind. She sits alone on one of the beds, clutching her hands and staring down at her lap, her mind drifting back to the lost meal and the pork soup she never got to taste. The silence is broken by a knock as Kurita-sensei enters, explaining that he heard about her injury from Ueno and the others and wanted to check on her. He approaches with a gentle smile, and she quickly tries to downplay the incident, insisting that the burn wasn't actually that bad and she is glad for his concern. In response, he reaches out and presents her with a store-bought tuna mayo rice ball, catching her completely by surprise as he offers it as a substitute for her missed lunch. She takes a grateful bite, her eyes closing in bliss as the savory flavor fills her and provides much-needed comfort to her empty stomach. While they sit together, a wave of melancholy washes over her as she reflects on how the day was supposed to go, feeling a bit sad despite the teacher's kindness. Her heart aches with the memory of her original plan, sharing a warm meal of Kurosuke's handmade rice balls and steaming pork soup, a vision of domestic happiness that feels far away. Shiraishi approaches her teacher with a furrowed brow, her voice soft as she inquires about Kurosa's absence. The teacher, looking equally troubled, admits that he hasn't been able to contact the boy at all, leaving them both in a state of uncertainty. As she processes this, the teacher ponders the situation, deciding that a home visit will be necessary if Kurosa remains unreachable by the following day. Shiraishi can only wonder what could have happened to keep him away from school. Her concern deepens when she catches a snippet of conversation between Ueno and Akiki. They are discussing a figure known as the Red Demon of Kasu High, a title that sounds ominous and entirely out of place in their quiet school life. The weight of the situation settles over her, and she finds herself praying for his safety. Nearby, the teacher clutches a small container, his own anxiety mounting as he hopes the boy hasn't found himself in the middle of some new conflict. The moment the school day ends, she springs into action, rushing through the crowded hallway to intercept Ueno before he can leave. She catches him just as he is heading out, her eyes wide with urgency as she asks for clarification on the demon he was just mentioning to their classmate. He stops, looking a bit surprised by her intensity, and explains that the person in question is Takuma Akagi, a notorious leader from the rough Casamino Technical High School who asserts himself over a crowd of aggressive punks. He goes on to reveal a hidden history, explaining that Akagi was once the most feared delinquent in the area until he was defeated by Kurosa 3 years ago, a humiliation that has fueled a long-standing grudge. The revelation leaves her stunned, struggling to reconcile the Kurosa she knows with someone who would be involved in such a violent past. He then delivers the most pressing news. Akagi has issued a challenge, claiming he will be waiting at the dry riverbed near Futaba Bridge, a notorious gathering spot for his gang, and then he simply walked away. He continues to describe the legendary clash, urging her to imagine the Azura facing off against that demon. The weight of the situation hits her hard, her eyes wide with disbelief as she realizes a violent confrontation is truly imminent. The panicked girl quickly pulls out her phone, her fingers trembling as she searches for the quickest path to Futaba Bridge. She wonders what might happen if she goes, but the urgency of the situation outweighs her fear. Her mind begins to spiral with doubt, her vision blurring as she questions her own usefulness. Even if he were in a desperate situation, she wonders what a girl like her could possibly achieve in the middle of a brawl. Despite her uncertainty, she breaks into a run. Suddenly, a cascade of water falls from above, catching her completely off guard. Drenched and shivering, she looks up in confusion as the sound of laughter echoes from a window above. Takamine peers down, a mischievous glint in her eyes, only now realizing that her friend was the one caught in the downpour. Omori rushes to the window, calling out to the soaked girl below. Shiraishi stands frozen, the shock of the cold water leaving her speechless. Inside the building, the dark-haired girl scolds her friend, demanding to know what she was thinking by dumping vase water out the window. Takamine remains calm, explaining that she simply didn't realize anyone was there. With a casual sigh, she offers a half-hearted apology to Omori, seemingly more bothered by the lecture than the accident itself. The concerned classmate turns her attention back to the shivering Shiraishi, worried about her going home in such a state. Takamine, however, has a solution, suggesting that the girl borrow the athletic jersey she is currently wearing. She points out the loose sleeves of her own garment, noting that since it is a size large, it should provide plenty of coverage. The girl can only stare in bewilderment at the unexpected offer. Takamine decisively hands over her oversized jersey, insisting that she simply has to let her friend borrow it. Despite her somewhat blunt delivery, her concern is evident as she brushes off any hesitation. Shiraishi, still damp from the earlier mishap, looks on with a mix of surprise and gratitude while Omori watches the exchange. She accepts the garment with a thankful smile, even as her friend warns that the dampness might make the fabric feel unpleasant against her skin. Laughing softly at the absurdity of the day's events, she remarks on how one complication seems to be following another in rapid succession. Now clad in the borrowed jersey, she waves a final goodbye to her classmates, who call out for her to be careful on her way back. As she turns to leave, a secret weight settles in her mind. She knows she cannot tell any authority figure that her true destination is the bridge where trouble is brewing. She hurries toward her goal, her footsteps quickening as worry begins to gnaw at her. Her thoughts drift to the stoic young man she is rushing to find, realizing that his stubborn nature would prevent him from asking for help even in the most dire of circumstances. Her expression hardens with a quiet resolve, her eyes fixed on the path ahead. A single, desperate plea echoes in her heart, a silent prayer for Kurosa's safety as she nears the site of the confrontation. Shiraishi approaches the shadow of Futaba Bridge, her heart hammering against her ribs as she enters the notorious territory of the Kasuhai gang. She scans the area, her eyes widening as she finally spots the group she has been searching for. They are gathered in a loose, menacing circle, their conversation thick with arrogance and the anticipation of violence. The thugs boast about their plan to humble the legendary Azura, laughing as they prepare a brutal welcome for the one they consider a traitor to their hierarchy. She fumbles with her phone, her fingers trembling as she tries to dial for help, but a sharp, aggressive shout from the perimeter shatters her hope of remaining unseen. The realization that she has been discovered sends a jolt of pure terror through her, as the gang's attention shifts entirely toward her. He stands amidst the hostile crowd, his stoic mask momentarily slipping to reveal a look of genuine horror as he sees her standing there. The shock of her presence in such a dangerous place leaves him momentarily paralyzed, his mind racing to understand how she found them. They waste no time exploiting this new leverage, the leader's eyes gleaming with malice as he orders his subordinates to seize the girl. She recoils in fear, her mind flooded with guilt as she realizes her attempt to help has only provided his enemies with a perfect weapon against him. He attempts a desperate, cold-hearted lie, claiming she is nothing more than a mere classmate who happened to wander into the wrong place. He stares at the thugs with forced indifference, hoping his words will convince them that she is of no value to him and should be let go. The brute with the buzz-cut sneers, completely unconvinced by the deception as he winds up a massive, heavy-handed punch. He lunges at the defenseless girl, his face twisted in a sadistic grin as he prepares to strike her down. He throws himself into the line of fire, the sickening sound of flesh hitting flesh echoing under the bridge as he takes the full force of the blow to his stomach. He gasps, blood and saliva spraying from his mouth, while she screams his name in a mixture of grief and terror. The leader steps forward, mocking the fallen warrior for his predictable soft spot for the weak and the innocent. He delivers a chilling ultimatum, making it clear that any resistance will result in the girl suffering far worse than a single punch. He stands tall despite the pain, his hands clenched at his sides as he accepts his fate as their human punching bag. Surrounded by the jeering gang, he prepares to endure whatever brutality they inflict, his only priority now being her safety. He stands motionless, absorbing a barrage of blows as the gang members revel in their cruelty. Shiraishi's desperate cries for them to stop are drowned out by their mocking laughter and the sickening thud of fists meeting flesh. The relentless assault continues, and he can feel his strength waning as a heavy blow to the stomach forces a pained gasp from his lips. Blood trickles from the corner of his mouth, and for a fleeting moment, the sheer terror of the situation threatens to overwhelm his resolve. His suffering is too much for Shiraishi to bear, and she screams at the top of her lungs for them to release him, her face contorted with grief and rage. Her defiance only irritates the gang leader, who dismisses her as a nuisance and orders his men to drag her away. Her defiance is met with brute force as one of the thugs roughly seizes her arm, hurling insults about her weight as he tries to force her to move. She stumbles, her eyes wide with shock at the sudden physical contact. As she is pulled along, she realizes that her presence as a hostage is the only thing keeping Kurosawa from fighting back. She observes her captor closely, noting that his grip is surprisingly weak and that he is much thinner than she is. This realization sparks a fire within her, and she decides that she can no longer remain a passive victim while her friend suffers. Ignoring the thugs' continued taunts, she prepares herself to take matters into her own hands. With a sudden, explosive burst of strength, she grabs the thug's arm and pivots, sending him flying over her shoulder in a perfect throw. She roars a warning, telling him never to underestimate her again. The thug hits the ground with a heavy thud, leaving the rest of the gang stunned by her sudden display of martial prowess. She stands her ground, shouting for the others to stay back and assuring Kurosawa that she will be fine. She pins the gasping man to the dirt, her expression fierce as she demands to know who they think they are to treat people this way. Her unexpected bravery shifts the momentum of the entire confrontation. Her unexpected bravery inspires him to finally break his silence and unleash his own fury, his fist connecting squarely with Akaji's jaw. He snarls a final warning, making it clear that anyone who dares to touch her will face the full weight of his wrath. He stands defiantly, his patience finally exhausted as he goads the remaining onlookers to stop hesitating and attack him all at once. He tears through the crowd with a ferocious roar, his fists and feet becoming a blur of calculated violence that leaves a trail of blood and broken bodies in its wake. He stands tall among the fallen as silence descends upon the alleyway, his chest heaving while the last of his attackers collapses into the dirt. He turns his gaze toward her, his face slick with sweat and the remnants of the struggle, while she watches from the sidelines, struck by the sheer intensity of his strength. She barely has time to process the victory before he is suddenly in front of her, his hands gripping her shoulders with frantic concern as he demands to know if she is unharmed. He feels his relief quickly turn to sharp reprimand as he questions her presence in such a dangerous place. prompting her to admit that her concern for his absence from school drove her to find him. He continues to press the point, his voice rising as he emphasizes how badly things could have gone, his grip tightening as he tries to make her understand the gravity of the risk she took. He watches as tears well in her eyes while she confesses that her actions were born of a worry so deep it bypassed all logic, leading her to intervene without a second thought for her own safety. She sees him catch himself as the harshness leaves his expression, realizing that criticizing her for caring is the wrong path, and he offers a quiet, sincere apology for his outburst. He looks her in the eye one last time, his voice firm but no longer angry as he makes her promise never to put herself in such danger again, a request she accepts with a soft, lingering gaze. He walks alongside Shiraishi and Takamine, questioning why Shiraishi is wearing the other girl's jersey, while Takamine laughs off the explanation as a long story. A sudden flashback flickers through the mind of a defeated foe, recalling a moment of contact and the name Takamine being whispered in the past. Back in the present, the fallen thug stares up at Shiraishi in shock, convinced that the person standing before him in the jersey is the very girl from his memory. He sneers from the ground, mocking her for not changing since she was a child and insulting her sturdy build, completely oblivious to his error in identity. The man's face contorts with rage and physical agony as he curses his luck, unable to accept that he was struck down so easily and humiliated once again. She looks down at the rambling man with a calm expression, gently informing him that he has the wrong person and that she isn't Takamine. His eyes roll back as he finally loses consciousness, prompting Kuroz to suggest they leave immediately before any more trouble arrives. They move away from the scene of the brawl, the silence of the night returning as the adrenaline of the fight begins to dissipate. He continues down the sidewalk with a steady pace, his hands in his pockets as he leads the way through the quiet urban landscape. Noticing the gap between them, he stops to ask why she is following at such a distance, only for her to explain with a nervous smile that she was worried about how it would look for him to be seen with someone like her. She continues the conversation as they walk, confirming that her home is also past the shopping district. He notes that their paths seem to align, as his place is in that general direction as well. Seizing the moment, she asks if she can accompany him the rest of the way. He gives a casual shrug of approval, telling her she doesn't need to seek permission for every small thing, which brings a bright, relieved smile to her face. As they move, she gazes at his profile, struck by his quiet strength. She wonders if being that strong means one stops worrying about the judgment of others. The pair comes to a sudden halt. She looks down at their feet, lost in the thought that perhaps she could find more confidence in herself if she possessed a fraction of his resilience. Their detour leads them to a vibrant display of produce, where a sign proudly announces a sale on daikon radishes for 98 yen. It is a bargain too good to pass up. He explains that he needs to make a quick stop at the local supermarket and suggests she head home if she's in a hurry. Instead, she eagerly offers to join him, her heart fluttering as she watches him meticulously select vegetables with the same intensity he brings to everything else. Soon, they are back on the street, and he is lugging a heavy plastic bag filled with groceries. Feeling guilty about the injuries he sustained protecting her, she offers to carry half, but he dismisses the idea, simply asking for directions to her home. They arrive at a tall, modern apartment complex. He leads the way to the door, informing her that it's open and inviting her to follow him inside. Once across the threshold, she offers a polite thanks for the invitation. He reassures her that there is no need for shyness, mentioning that his younger sister is currently away at club activities. She finds herself standing in his living space, realizing with a start that she had carried his belongings all the way to his door. He turns toward the kitchen, casually offering her a choice between coffee or tea. He stands calmly in the kitchen, suggesting they take a break with some tea. Shiraishi, however, is a whirlwind of internal panic, her heart racing at the realization that they are truly alone in his home. She tries to convince herself she only came along out of concern for his injuries, but her frantic thoughts betray a deep-seated nervousness that she can't quite shake. Moments later, he sets a steaming cup of tea and a neatly plated slice of cake before her. The sight and aroma are so enticing that her stomach lets out a loud, traitorous growl, much to her immediate mortification. Blushing furiously at the sound, she sheepishly accepts the offering, her curiosity piqued as she asks if he was the one who baked the treat. He admits that he did, explaining that after the confrontation with Akagi earlier that day, he felt the need to do something to settle his mind. She finds the concept of meditating with a cake to be an incredible and unique idea. He elaborates, describing how the focused, rhythmic process of baking helped him find a sense of peace and put his mind at ease after the day's violence. As they settle into the conversation, she mentions that Korea-sensei had been worried about him, noting that his father, currently working in Ivory Coast, hadn't been able to reach him. He confirms that his father is indeed in Africa for work, a trade company employee who travels frequently for business. With a stoic expression, he notes that his father's absence is simply a reality he has grown accustomed to. The conversation takes a surprising turn when he mentions having lived in Australia for a time. She is visibly stunned, her eyes wide with shock as she realizes he is a Ritterni who can likely speak English fluently. He clarifies that his time abroad was limited to his early elementary years, from 1st to 3rd grade, and he was far from fluent. He recalls with a hint of bitterness how others would mock his pronunciation, leading him to stay silent rather than risk further ridicule by trying to talk back. Shifting his stance, he clenches a powerful fist, asserting that even when words fail or are misunderstood, physical strength serves as a universal language that everyone understands. She watches him, mesmerized by the intensity and conviction in his gaze. He then mentions a Jeet Kyun-do dojo located near his home, asking if she is familiar with the legendary Bruce Lee. The atmosphere shifts from the personal to the philosophical as he reflects on the person who inspired his path. He continues his explanation, describing Jeet Kune Do as a mixed martial art founded by Bruce Lee that focuses on offensive movement to defeat an opponent. As he demonstrates a strike, he admits that he wasn't strong from the beginning, but learned that a single fist carries more weight than 100 words when faced with mockery. This philosophy of self-improvement resonates deeply with her as he explains that while some things are fixed, others can be changed through effort. She watches him, wondering if she too can transform herself into someone who can stand by his side without feeling ashamed. The quiet moment is interrupted by a sharp chime from her phone, signaling a message from her father. He informs her that he received a call from the school through his company, likely regarding the recent trouble. Seeing the notification, he suggests they exchange contact information just in case another situation arises. The request catches her off guard, her eyes widening in surprise at the sudden offer. He holds out his device, explaining that since there's no telling if that Akaji fellow is truly finished, it's better to be prepared. His expression is serious, focused on her safety. After they finalize the exchange, she teases him for being such a worrier, though he simply shrugs it off, telling her it's fine if she can't handle things on her own. Looking down at the screen, she sees the name Akira Kuro's newly added to her contacts. It feels strange and significant to have this direct link to him now. The realization of the time prompts her to ask about the pork soup she prepared, suddenly remembering her promise to make rice balls as well. As they continue to talk, the conversation shifts toward her friend, Takamine. He asks about the other girl's constant harshness, prompting her to reflect on why her friend is always so hard on her, even when she's trying her best. She brings up Takamine, questioning why Akaji would have mistaken her for the other girl. Across from her, the young man listens intently while taking a sip from his cup. Looking down at the garment she's wearing, she wonders if the confusion stemmed from the jersey itself, which clearly bears Takamine's name. She recalls how Akaji reacted instantly to the name, despite his fading consciousness. The possibility lingers in her mind that Akaji's crude remarks about her physique were actually directed at his memory of Takamine. She considers the cruel insults he hurled and wonders if her friend had once been much heavier, a thought that makes her pause. This realization leads her to a painful conclusion. If her presence serves as a constant reminder of a past Takamine wants to forget, it would explain the girl's frequent irritation. Her companion, however, finds this line of reasoning incredibly selfish. She remembers Akaji's taunt about not changing since childhood, which confirms her suspicion that Takamine was a target of his bullying long ago. The weight of that shared history begins to settle on her. Sensing her shift in mood, he asks if she is actually starting to feel pity for the person who treats her so poorly. He acknowledges that the harassment Takamine endured must have been truly horrific. She finds herself filled with self-loathing, feeling weak for only overthinking while others, like him, took active steps to change their lives. He counters this by stating that no past trauma justifies her being bullied now, and advises her to seek help from a teacher if she cannot stand up for herself. Staring at her own reflection in the dark liquid of her cup, she wonders despondently who could ever find her worthy of love. His voice breaks the silence, bluntly telling her to stop moping and eat. He leans in slightly, asking if the chiffon cake is not to her liking. The question jolts her back to the present, making her realize she had completely ignored the treat sitting right in front of her. Shaking off the gloom, she decides that getting depressed is a waste of time, especially with homemade cake waiting to be enjoyed. With a bright smile, she prepares to dig in, her spirits finally lifting. She gasps in pure wonder as she beholds the incredibly soft texture of the chiffon cake before her, the steam rising gently from the plate. Taking a large, eager bite, she is immediately struck by how light and moist it feels, her cheeks puffing out as she savors the unexpected quality of the treat. As she continues to eat, she notes the subtle hints of banana and maple syrup, concluding that the pairing is perfection and wondering if the stoic young man across from her is actually a culinary genius. He calmly explains the secret behind the puffiness, detailing how relentlessly beating the egg whites to create a thorough meringue allows the dough to expand significantly, much to her amazement as she compares it to eating a cloud. The delicious treat vanishes in no time, leaving nothing but a clean plate and a lone fork behind as the last crumbs are enjoyed. Seeing her finish, he offers a second helping, reassuring her that he used less sugar because of the natural sweetness of the bananas and even accounted for physical health by keeping the flour content low, addressing the worries she might have about calories. After a long and taxing day, she casts aside her hesitation and brightly asks for another slice, a genuine smile lighting up her face as she decides to indulge. He watches her, noting how being enveloped by the aroma of the tender cake seems to be giving her a much-needed burst of energy after her recent struggles. As she digs into the second piece, he remarks on how much she truly seems to enjoy her meals, noting that this cake is far superior to anything Akaji could offer. She simply continues to eat with a look of pure, unadulterated bliss, finding comfort in the simple joy of a well-made dessert and the kindness of her companion. She blinked in surprise, her expression one of pure confusion as she questioned what was happening. In response, he quickly averted his gaze, his profile hardening as he curtly dismissed her inquiry, claiming that there was nothing to discuss. Rumors are swirling through the halls of the school like a wildfire. The story of the confrontation with the Kasu High Gang has taken on a life of its own, with students whispering about how a single individual, the one they call the demon, took on 100 of them alone and sent them all to the hospital. He is the primary subject of every conversation, as Takuma Akiki observes to Shiraishi that Kuro's coin is certainly stirring up quite the buzz lately. Shiraishi listens quietly, the weight of the rumors hanging heavy in the air of the classroom. The school bell finally rings, signaling the start of the long-awaited lunch break. While some students rush off to the school store to beat the crowds, Shiraishi remains at her desk, her chin resting on her hand as she daydreams about the contents of her bento box for the day. Nearby, a sharp-eyed girl with light, styled hair watches the room with a predatory gaze. Her expression is cold and calculating, masking a cruel intent that is about to manifest. She, along with a dark-haired companion, approaches Amori-san's desk with a forced, superficial friendliness. They invite her to join them for lunch, but Amori politely declines, explaining she already made a promise to eat with someone else. The blonde girl's smile doesn't reach her eyes as she pushes further, mockingly suggesting that Amori usually eats alone in the restroom anyway. Amori tries to excuse herself again, apologizing and explaining that she didn't even bring a lunch today and needs to go buy something. The blonde girl dismisses the excuse immediately, telling her not to be so difficult and refusing to let her leave. Suddenly, she pulls out a package of cream bread and holds it high for the entire classroom to see. With a loud, mocking voice, she announces that she has brought food specifically to feed Amori, who can only stare in confusion and growing dread as the attention of the room shifts toward her. The situation takes a dark turn as she drops the bread onto the floor and grinds her shoe into it, crushing the pastry into the dirt. With a twisted, malicious grin, she declares that she will begin feeding the pig now, demanding to know if the little piggy is going to eat. The surrounding students erupt into cruel laughter, joining in on the public humiliation. They mock Amori's appearance and habits, jeering about what a pig would even find attractive or if she is simply on a diet, while she stands frozen and humiliated in the center of their ridicule. She cowers on the floor, the weight of the humiliation pressing down on her as a classmate demands she start eating the mess of food scattered across the tiles. As the girl trembles, a shadow falls over the scene. Kuros stands in the doorway, his expression darkening as he takes in the cruel display and the girl's desperate state. Seeing him, one of the boys in the group casually explains that they are simply feeding a pig, inviting him to join the spectacle with a mocking grin. He stares down at the mangled remains of the bread, his silence heavy and ominous as the bully offers him a turn to participate in the harassment. Without a word, the tall youth lunges forward, seizing the instigator by the throat and forcefully shoving the crushed food into the boy's own mouth. The blonde leader shrieks in disbelief at his sudden violence, demanding to know why he would side with someone like her. But he merely growls that he cannot stand those who treat food with such disrespect. As he stands his ground, a wave of mocking whispers ripples through the onlookers, who find it hilarious that the infamous Ajura would be interested in a girl they consider a social outcast. Ignoring the jeers, he reaches down and offers a hand to the shaken girl, gently telling her it is time to leave this place and checking if she is alright. Behind them as they prepare to walk away, the blonde girl erupts into fits of cruel laughter, finding the idea of the two of them dating to be the ultimate joke. He pauses just long enough to cast a final, chilling glare over his shoulder, warning them to end their pathetic behavior before he leads his classmate away from the hostile crowd. He stands tall, his voice low and dangerous as he warns Takamine that whatever past grievances she holds, she has no right to vent them on Amori. Shiraishi watches, her breath catching in her throat as the tension reaches a breaking point. He is suddenly interrupted when Shiraishi lunges forward, her hand clamping onto his arm in a desperate attempt to silence him. She pleads with him to stop, bringing up a painful memory from their elementary school days involving Akaji and a cruel nickname, leaving him momentarily bewildered by her sudden intervention. He ignores the plea, turning his gaze toward the gathering crowd to expose the truth behind Takamine's hostility. He begins to announce that the real reason for the bullying is rooted in a secret, while Shiraishi's eyes widen in pure terror, realizing he is about to say something that cannot be taken back. He is silenced not by words, but by a sharp, desperate strike as Shiraishi lashes out, her hand connecting with a stinging force. A scream of "Ino!" tears from her throat, echoing through the hallway as she takes a stand against the very person trying to defend her. He stands frozen, the impact of the blow still radiating as a heavy, suffocating silence falls over the corridor. Nearby, Amori can only stare in mute horror, caught between the boy who fought for her and the girl who just struck him. He looks down at the girl who hit him, his expression unreadable behind the bandages on his face, while she remains paralyzed by the weight of her own impulsive action. The air is thick with unspoken questions as the confrontation grinds to a sudden, jarring halt. She cannot bear the weight of the moment a second longer and turns, bolting down the hallway with tears streaming down her face. Her mind is a whirlwind of regret, apologizing silently to Kuros as she flees from the scene of her own outburst. He remains behind, his voice flat as he tells Takamine to simply endure the situation for now. In the distance, the silhouette of their fleeing friend grows smaller, leaving the remaining students in a state of fractured confusion. She eventually finds a quiet corner to collapse, the image of Amori's face burned into her mind. The shock and the raw pain she witnessed are feelings she recognizes with a haunting familiarity, mirroring the scars of her own past. She buries her face in her hands, the realization dawning on her that Kuros's fury was entirely for her benefit. The guilt of her helplessness weighs heavy on her heart, leaving her to weep in the shadows of the school. She stood frozen, watching his retreating back as the weight of her reliance on him pressed down like a physical burden. Sinking to the ground, she buried her face in her knees, the word pathetic echoing in her mind alongside the crushing fear that she had finally pushed him too far. Later, a finality was etched into a digital message. a formal apology that severed their shared lunchtime ritual and released him from the obligation of her cooking. Elsewhere, the mundane rhythms of school life continued as Amori stood before a display of pastries, her stomach growling with a hunger she hadn't felt in quite some time. With a soft rustle, she set her selection down, ready to find a quiet place to eat. As she began to eat, her thoughts drifted to the empty seat nearby. She sat in solitude, relieved to avoid a confrontation, yet paralyzed by her inability to bridge the growing distance between them. The quiet was interrupted when a teacher, Kurita-sensei, approached with his own lunch in hand, surprised to find a student still lingering in the area. He gestured to the space beside her, offering a warm smile as he asked for permission to join her, a request that caught her completely off guard. Settling in, he observed her modest meal and remarked on her light appetite, comparing it to his own preference for something more substantial like inari sushi. He then shared a startling personal detail, explaining with a calm smile that a past illness had required the surgical removal of part of his stomach, necessitating his own small portions. He explains that while the surgery wasn't a total removal, it left him unable to handle large portions or greasy foods. Amori listens, her expression softening with empathy as she realizes the weight of his words. He watches as she looks down at the food in her hands, reflecting on her own relationship with eating. To her, food is a lifeline, the very thing that helps her navigate through difficult or sorrowful moments. Reaching into her bag, she offers him a carton of milk tea she won in a raffle, hoping to share a small joy. He declines with a gentle smile, pointing out that the sweet drink wouldn't quite complement the savory flavor of his soba. She takes a large, satisfying bite of her snack, her cheeks puffing out as she chews. Watching her, he can't help but let out a soft, amused chuckle at her unbridled enthusiasm for the meal. She receives a warm look from him as he admits that he had been worried about her, noticing she seemed downcast recently. However, seeing her eat with such gusto reassures him that she is finding her way back to her usual self. They sit side by side against the rooftop fence, the tension of the earlier revelation fading into a comfortable silence. He assures her that he is doing just fine, prompting a bright, genuine laugh from her. They finish their time together as the shared meal comes to an end with a quiet word of gratitude for the food, the moment of connection lingering in the air. The following day brings a new lunch, a bento box packed tightly with golden, crispy fried morsels. She dives into the meal with her usual vigor, savoring every bite of the savory treats. Yet, as she reaches the bottom of the container, a realization strikes her. Despite the generous portion, it simply isn't enough to satisfy her growing appetite. Her appetite only seems to grow as the next day arrives, bringing with it another substantial meal of noodles and hearty sides. She continues to shovel food into her mouth, the large bento box quickly emptying, yet the gnawing sensation in her gut remains. No matter how much she consumes, the void within her refuses to be filled. Later, she sits alone by a chain-link fence, staring blankly ahead. A single water bottle rests beside her as she wonders if there's a literal hole in her stomach, unable to comprehend this bottomless hunger. The physical toll of her binge eventually catches up, and she collapses onto her side, clutching her midsection in pain. She berates herself for her lack of control, feeling like a fool for eating until it hurts. Even as she lies there, her hand resting on her bloated stomach, she realizes that this belly will never be satisfied by food alone. She acknowledges that she has been running away, and the hunger is merely a symptom of a deeper, unaddressed problem. Her thoughts drift back to Kurita-sensei, specifically the moment she struck him. She realizes that if she wants to move forward, she needs to find the courage to confront him and properly explain the reasons behind her outburst, hoping he might understand. Reflecting on her tendency to flee from reality, she acknowledges that while some things are immutable, her own actions are not. She decides that she can no longer let things remain as they are, stagnant and unresolved, and that she must be the one to initiate change. With a sudden spark of determination, Amori sits up and grips her phone. The resolve is clear in her eyes as she declares to herself that she will finally talk things out with him, no longer willing to hide. She quickly types out a message, requesting a meeting on the rooftop during next week's lunch break. With a final, decisive tap, she sends the invitation, the weight of the upcoming confrontation already settling in as she watches the confirmation appear. As she stares at the screen, she admits that her desire for change is fueled by the example set by Kurosuke. He is the one who consistently inspires her to strive for a better version of herself and to face her challenges head-on. When the day finally arrives, she stands outside the school building, her heart racing with nerves. Her focus is momentarily broken, however, by the unexpected sight of a police car parked near the entrance, casting a shadow of unease over her planned meeting. She slides the door open, her heart likely pounding as she enters the room to find Kurita-sensei waiting. He immediately asks if she knows anything about the current situation, catching her off guard. She can only respond with a confused question, wondering what exactly he is referring to. Seeing her bewilderment, he clarifies that his inquiry is about Kuros. Her eyes widen in a tight close-up as the weight of the question sinks in. She asks what could have possibly happened to him, her gaze dropping to their feet as the tension in the room thickens. Stunned by his silence, she watches as the teacher's expression remains grim while he delivers the shocking news. Kuros has been arrested. He notes that even she seems to be in the dark about the situation. She struggles to process the words, asking for clarification on what such a dire statement could possibly mean. She listens in silence as he explains the gravity of the situation, stating that Kuros is accused of extorting a student from another school, which explains the police presence on campus. She is left in a state of utter disbelief, her mind racing as she tries to reconcile this accusation with the person she knows. It simply doesn't make any sense to her. While she reels from the news, the teacher stands with his back turned, his posture heavy with the weight of the scandal. A montage of Kurosa's intense and stoic face flickers through her mind as she desperately tries to convince herself that he would never do something like that. Despite her faith, a deep worry gnaws at her, leaving her wondering if he will truly be okay. Shiraishi rushes up to her classmates, her face pale with concern. She asks them directly if the rumors circulating through the school are true. Has Kurosa really been arrested? Her classmates look back at her with grim expressions. Takuma, adjusting his glasses, quickly corrects her, explaining that while he hasn't been arrested, he is currently being questioned as a suspect in a case involving students from Kazuha High. Ueno stands by, his mouth agape in disbelief at the news. She stands frozen as the weight of the situation sinks in. She struggles to reconcile the boy she knows with the accusations, thinking that while a fight might be possible, there is no way he would ever resort to something as low as extortion. The surrounding chatter in the hallway only fuels her anxiety. Other students whisper among themselves, dismissively labeling him as a delinquent who finally went too far. Distressed by the cold judgments, she demands to know his current location. She pushes her way through the throng of curious onlookers gathered in the corridor, her eyes fixed on the door to the student guidance office. Through the window, she witnesses a heated interrogation. A voice from within roars at him, accusing him of being the culprit and demanding a confession for the trouble he's caused. She stood frozen in the hallway as the interrogation within the guidance office reached a fever pitch. Inside, the teacher leaned in with a face contorted by rage, accusing the young man of lying about his involvement in a recent incident. He pointed out that a student ID belonging to the boy had been discovered at the scene, but the accused remained stoic, claiming the situation didn't sound familiar at all. He continued his verbal assault, shifting from the evidence to biting personal attacks. The educator claimed he had only been lenient because of the boy's difficult home life, but now insisted he was the only student capable of such a crime. He even mocked the boy's appearance, citing his refusal to fix his sloppy look as further proof of his inherent delinquency. The man slammed his hand onto the table, demanding a confession before any more trouble was caused for the school. He barked at the student to watch his attitude, but the boy's mind was reeling from a particularly cruel insult directed at his parents' lack of education, leaving him simmering with a quiet, dangerous fury. As his temper flared to the point of physical aggression, a calmer administrator stepped in to de-escalate the situation. He reminded the room that they had only come to hear the student's side of the story for the day, allowing the boy to firmly and profanely reiterate that he was innocent of the charges. They then laid out the grim details of the crime. A first-year student from Casamino High had been ambushed from behind and robbed of his wallet early in the evening. According to witness testimonies, the culprit had been wearing a mask and the distinctive uniform of Futaba High, casting a shadow of suspicion over the entire student body. It was the discovery of the student ID at the scene that had turned suspicion into a direct accusation. The card, bearing the boy's name and photo, was presented as the final, damning piece of evidence that linked him undeniably to the location of the robbery. They maintained a stern but measured tone, warning the boy that hiding the truth would not do him any favors in the long run. They explained that given the overwhelming circumstances, they had expected him to know something and were providing this chance for him to come clean. Outside the office, they listened in growing horror as the authorities pressured their friend to prioritize honesty over his own defense. The way the administrators phrased their advice felt less like a search for the truth and more like a demand for a confession, leaving the onlookers feeling powerless. She felt a surge of pure indignation at the unfairness of it all, refusing to accept that a misplaced ID was enough to brand someone a criminal. To her, the idea of automatically treating him like a culprit based on such flimsy, potentially planted evidence was a betrayal of justice. She finally reached her breaking point and cried out from the doorway, her voice trembling with emotion as she questioned why no one would believe him. Turning to her friends, she argued passionately that no real culprit would ever be so careless as to leave behind such obvious, identifying evidence, pleading for someone to see the logic in his innocence. She bursts through the doors, her voice trembling with indignation as she declares that there is no way Kurosa would ever resort to extortion. Tears well in her eyes as she demands to know why the faculty is so quick to label him a criminal based on nothing but assumptions. Following her lead, Amori steps forward to question the logic of the evidence, pointing out how suspiciously convenient it was for a student ID to be found at the scene. She adds that it makes little sense for a culprit to wear a school uniform during their time off, casting further doubt on the accusation. As she continues to argue that the situation is fundamentally flawed, the guidance teacher cuts her off with a sharp bark. He sneers that they are dealing with a delinquent like Kurosa, claiming that ordinary common sense simply doesn't apply to someone of his reputation. The air in the room grows heavy as the faculty's narrow-minded expectations are laid bare, listing superficial traits like hair color and family structure as the only metrics for a student's worth. To them, anyone who doesn't fit this rigid mold is automatically a suspect. Refusing to back down, she counters that their so-called common sense is nothing more than a list of traits that make a student easy for teachers to manage. Her voice rings out with newfound strength as she implores them not to judge her peers on such a superficial and unfair level. The guidance teacher's patience snaps, and he slams his hands onto the table with a deafening crack, ordering the students to return to their classrooms immediately. Amidst the shouting, Kurosa remains silent, his gaze fixed downward as the chaos of the confrontation swirls around him. Moments later, She finds herself alone in the hallway, her mind racing as she desperately searches for a way to secure Kurosa's release. Seeing a police officer nearby, she hesitates for a heartbeat, wondering what she could possibly say to change the course of the investigation. Before she can approach the officer, Takamine appears at her side, whispering that she has a lead on the true culprit. She reveals that she witnessed something suspicious on Friday, just before their gym class, offering a glimmer of hope in the face of the false accusations. The memory flashes back to the moment Takamine caught a student named Maeda in the act. He stood in the quiet hallway, staring down at the student ID he had taken from Kurosa, his expression unreadable as he held the key to the entire frame-up. Back in the present, a murmur of shock ripples through the gathered students as Maeda's name is spoken aloud. Kurita-sensei steps in to restore order, dismissing the other students while making it clear that he intends to hear every detail of this new development. He watches as the students disperse, but the tension remains thick in the air. Takamine approaches Shiraishi, her expression unreadable as she asks if the girl is alright. Shiraishi offers a weak, non-committal response, her mind clearly still reeling from the interrogation. Sensing the need for privacy, she suggests they move to a more secluded location to speak further. Once they are alone, Shiraishi expresses her gratitude, thanking her companion for standing up for Kurosa. She quickly corrects her, maintaining a cool distance by stating she merely reported what she witnessed rather than acting out of defense. This prompts Shiraishi to seek clarification, asking if this confirms Maeda's involvement in both the theft of the student ID and the subsequent extortion. The taller girl elaborates, explaining that while Maeda confessed to the theft, he claimed the extortion was not his doing. He was simply acting under someone else's orders. Shiraishi presses for a name, desperate to understand the scope of the conspiracy. She reveals the mastermind behind the scheme, Akagi from Casamino. The name strikes a chord of fear and recognition in Shiraishi, who can only gasp in disbelief. To provide context, she recounts how Maeda was coerced. He had found a letter in his shoe locker detailing a handoff location and was threatened with retaliation from Akagi if he failed to comply. The instructions were clear: obtain Kurosa's ID and a Futaba uniform in exchange for settling a grudge. Confused by this sudden transparency, Shiraishi asks why she is being trusted with this information. Her friend pauses, her gaze softening as she prepares to reveal a more personal motivation. She begins to recount her own history, describing a time in elementary school when she was ridiculed for her weight and eventually abandoned by her friends. She explains that Akagi had targeted her then, and because of that experience, she deeply understands the injustice of being judged solely by superficial traits. Looking at Shiraishi, she admits that seeing the girl's struggle felt like looking at a reflection of her own past self, which sparked a sense of irritation she couldn't ignore. She concludes by calling her actions selfish, though her honesty suggests a burgeoning bond of empathy. She reflects on the moment she chose to intervene, unable to stomach her own complicity any longer. Despite the cruelty she had previously shown, seeing the other girl's face compelled her to act, a small attempt at atonement for her past transgressions. This internal reckoning leads her to bow low in the hallway, her voice trembling as she offers a sincere and heavy apology for her past behavior. In response, the girl before her begins to weep, overwhelmed by the weight of the history between them. She realizes that a simple "no worries" or "I forgive you" is impossible right now, given the scars left by their past interactions. Yet, through the tears, a soft smile emerges as she expresses a quiet hope that a day will eventually come when forgiveness is possible. Wiping her eyes, she reassures her former tormentor that she will be fine and urges her to seek out the one person she truly needs to speak with, Kurosa. Taking those words to heart, she sprints through the school corridors, her mind flooded with memories of the fulfilling days they once shared. She wonders if an apology can bridge the gap, or if their future remains an uncertain path. She finally reaches the rooftop, finding him leaning against the fence. He notes her late arrival with his usual stoic demeanor, while she struggles to catch her breath. Without a word of greeting, both of them suddenly double over in a deep, synchronized bow, their voices overlapping as they desperately offer apologies for their respective failures. As she looks at him, a painful realization strikes her. The very words she intended to use were the ones that had once wounded her most deeply. She sees her own hesitation as a despicable act of cowardice. He, however, counters her self-reproach, admitting that her intervention actually prevented him from making a grave mistake. They stand there, two souls burdened by regret, each trying to take the blame for the distance that has grown between them. He stands quietly as she continues her apology, her voice soft as she admits she hasn't been able to say these words for a very long time. Looking up at him, she expresses her gratitude, thanking him for getting angry on her behalf when she couldn't find the strength herself. The weight of the moment lingers on the rooftop as she reflects on her own unexpected courage, surprised that she actually stood up to the teacher and the police for his sake. The tension breaks into lighthearted laughter, though he can't help but worry about the inevitable lecture from the authorities later, while she jokingly promises to handle them when the time comes. Suddenly, a loud, rumbling growl erupts from her stomach, shattering the sentimental atmosphere and leaving her blushing with embarrassment. Realizing the time, he notes that it's already lunch, though he admits with a hint of regret that he didn't prepare anything to eat today. She quickly tells him to wait and hurries over to her bag, returning with a wrapped container that she holds out tentatively. Her heart races with nerves as he prepares to open the lid, her mind filled with the hope that he will enjoy the meal she worked so hard to prepare. The lid comes off to reveal a beautifully arranged bento, filled with neatly shaped rice balls and carefully prepared side dishes that she managed to make herself. With a shy smile, she encourages him to help himself, hoping that her cooking can measure up to the effort he always puts into his own meals. She watches intently as he examines the rice ball she prepared. He notes the inclusion of miso mixed meat and, deciding the appearance doesn't matter, takes a large, expectant bite. As he chews, her heart races with anticipation, the rhythmic thumping audible only to her. She watches his every expression, hoping the flavors she carefully balanced have hit their mark. Unable to bear the silence any longer, she leans in slightly, her voice trembling as she asks for his verdict. The pressure of his judgment feels immense, making the simple act of waiting an agonizing ordeal. His face suddenly brightens with a genuine smile as he declares the meal to be excellent. He breaks down the profile, praising the balance of sweet and salty miso and the deep, aromatic touch of sesame oil, leaving her flooded with an overwhelming sense of relief. Overjoyed by the praise, she begins to eat her own portion with newfound gusto, her cheeks flushed with pride. The thought that someone of his caliber would actually ask her for a recipe makes her wonder if she possesses a hidden talent for the culinary arts. However, the critique becomes more nuanced as they delve further into the bento. He points out that the boiled vegetables are slightly undercooked and firm, while questioning the texture of the chicken, forcing her to admit that some elements were indeed a bit difficult to master. They settle into a quiet rhythm, sitting side by side as they continue their meal in the peaceful atmosphere of the room. Looking down at the remaining food, he concedes that while the flavors aren't bad, the overall style is distinctly different from his own meticulous preparations. Because of this discrepancy, he bluntly suggests that he should probably remain in charge of their meals moving forward. She reacts with a start, surprised by his sudden reclaim of the kitchen, though she privately acknowledges that mastering the craft is far more difficult than she initially realized. He simply offers a dry, knowing look in response to her realization, as if the difficulty of the task was a foregone conclusion. He pauses, the air between them thick with a sudden, heavy hesitation as he searches for the right words. Amori waits patiently, sensing the shift in his usually stoic demeanor. Looking away toward the fence, he finally asks if she would allow him to continue preparing meals for her, provided she doesn't mind the arrangement. Because of his request, she beams with pure joy, giving an enthusiastic confirmation, but her excitement is met with his sudden, piercing gaze as he asks if she truly understands the weight of keeping such a promise. The young girl falters, her brow furrowing in confusion as he presses further, questioning if she envisions this lasting for the school year, until graduation, or perhaps something even more permanent. As the realization of his intensity begins to dawn on her, he turns fully toward her, his expression unwavering as he confesses his feelings and asks her to be his girlfriend. Stunned by the sudden declaration, she can only whisper his name, her mind racing to process the words that just hung in the air between them. Sensing her shock, he softens his tone, assuring her that she is under no obligation to accept and can refuse if she doesn't feel the same way. Her heart hammers against her ribs, a deafening rhythm that drowns out the world as she struggles to reconcile his words with her own self-perception. Inwardly, she spirals into doubt, questioning why someone like him would ever be interested in a girl she considers so plain and unremarkable. Breaking the silence, he explains that his motivation is simple. He finds genuine joy in seeing the expression of pure happiness on someone's face when they truly savor a meal he has prepared. He had always seemed to be glaring, a realization that now makes her look back at their shared lunches with a new perspective. She had misinterpreted his intense gaze, never imagining he was simply captivated by the way she enjoyed her meals. Despite his confession, she struggles with her own deep-seated insecurities, convinced that her appearance makes her unworthy of such affection. To her, the idea of someone like him falling for someone like her feels like an impossibility, a sentiment she voices with a self-deprecating laugh. He gently corrects her, admitting that while her appetite was the initial draw, his feelings have evolved far beyond that. He is now drawn to her entire being, not just the joy she finds in food. She listens in stunned silence as he continues, telling her that she possesses a strength far greater than his own. The comparison leaves her breathless, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and burgeoning hope. He elaborates on this strength, recounting the times she stood her ground against those who would do harm and her willingness to involve the authorities when necessary. Her capacity for forgiveness and her courage in the face of adversity are, in his eyes, her most defining traits. Because of these qualities, he finds himself completely captivated by her. He leans in slightly, reinforcing his admiration for the person she has proven herself to be. His words act as a balm, slowly dismantling the cruel labels she had placed upon herself. The self-imposed curse of being just a fat pig begins to fade, replaced by the warmth of his genuine appreciation. While she finds his specific way of complimenting her a bit unusual, she can't help but feel a sense of cool sincerity from him. The tension breaks slightly as they sit together, the weight of the moment settling into something more comfortable. A profound sense of happiness washes over her, yet it is accompanied by a lingering doubt. She wonders if she is truly worthy of such a sincere love, her heart racing as she contemplates how to respond to his vulnerability. Finally, she finds her voice, admitting that she shares his feelings. With a blush and a determined look, she confesses that she likes him too, bringing their long-standing uncertainty to a heartfelt conclusion. She bows so low her forehead nearly touches the ground, her voice ringing out with a sudden, desperate declaration of commitment to their new bond. The intensity of the moment is broken only by a small, involuntary puff of air from her lips as the weight of her own words finally sinks in. Moments later, the young woman sits frozen, a half-eaten rice ball still clutched in her hand as she realizes the absurdity of making such a confession while eating. Beside her, The stoic youth shifts uncomfortably, his usual composure replaced by a bashful mumble as he echoes her sentiment, admitting that he, too, is eager for what lies ahead. He looks away, a faint flush creeping across his sharp features as he tentatively tests the weight of her given name, Shizuka, on his tongue. The silence between them stretches, thick with the gravity of this newfound intimacy. Hearing him speak her name sends a strange thrill through her, making the familiar syllables feel entirely new and precious. She can only offer a soft, breathy affirmation in response, her heart swelling with a quiet joy that she is no longer just a classmate, but someone special to him. With tears of relief shimmering in her eyes, she offers a radiant, genuine smile. It has been a long time since a simple meal felt this fulfilling, the emotional weight of her past insecurities finally lifting in the warmth of his acceptance. As they sit side by side on the bench, she addresses him by his first name, Akira, a final thank you whispered for the unexpected gift of his affection. He watches her, marveling at the whirlwind of emotions she carries, a girl as unpredictable and bright as a sun shower on a restless afternoon. The rainy season has officially arrived, marking the passage of half of June. As the clouds gather, a quiet contemplation arises regarding the possibility of lunching on the rooftop today. She sits at her desk, reflecting on the newfound tranquility of her surroundings. The chaos of the recent police incident has faded into a distant memory, replaced by the mundane concern of finding a dry place to eat. Perhaps the lounge, should the rain begin to fall. Because of the proximity of their seats, she considers the classroom as a potential sanctuary, though the presence of their peers makes the idea feel somewhat exposed. A soft blush warms her cheeks as she rests her face in her hands, lost in the realization that a full week has passed since she and Akira began their relationship. Despite the time that has passed, she has kept this development a closely guarded secret, sitting quietly in the classroom while he remains just a few desks away. Her quiet thoughts are pierced by the teacher's sharp reprimand, demanding to know if Amori is even paying attention. The sudden outburst leaves her feeling exposed and barraged by embarrassment, even though the scrutiny isn't directed at her. She shifts her feet nervously as the classroom tension rises, while the teacher continues to press the distracted student to solve the problem on the board. She is soon approached by him as the lunch break begins. He leans in with a casual air, asking if she would like to eat right there in the classroom today. Glancing at the window, she notes the light rain beginning to trickle down and readily agrees to the suggestion. Her eyes sparkle with excitement as she peels back the lid of her bento, revealing a row of plump sushi neatly wrapped in golden, fried tofu. They settle into their meal together, and she finds the deep-fried tofu to be incredibly juicy and flavorful. As she happily digs in, he watches her with a quiet intensity, a small sound of curiosity escaping him as he notices something about her or her meal. She explains the delightful contrast in her meal, noting how the crunchy roasted turnip leaves complement the soft filling and vinegared rice. Her companion listens intently, impressed by her culinary creativity and the effort she put into the preparation. Overwhelmed by the simple joy of the flavors, she lets out a cheerful exclamation in praise of the humble turnip, while he watches her with a quiet, affectionate gaze, clearly charmed by her enthusiasm. Once the meal is finished, they sit together in a comfortable silence, both feeling full and content as she offers a polite word of thanks for the food. Looking around their familiar rooftop sanctuary, she points out a fire alarm she hadn't noticed before, prompting him to remark on the school's strict safety regulations and the hidden details of their surroundings that often go unseen. She drifts into a pleasant reverie, realizing that while it has only been a month since their shared lunches began, she already finds herself looking forward to many more moments and new sights together in the future. As she continues to giggle softly, lost in the afterglow of the meal and her own thoughts, he looks on with a mix of confusion and mild amusement, wondering what could possibly be so funny. Later that day, after the final bell has rung, she is interrupted while speaking with a classmate by the sudden appearance of a poised young woman who asks for a moment of her time. The newcomer leads her away toward the school's backyard, explaining that their conversation requires a more private setting than the crowded hallways where they might be overheard. Following closely behind, she can't help but feel a growing sense of curiosity and slight apprehension about what could be so important that it needs to be discussed in secret. Upon reaching a secluded spot, she finally asks what is on the other girl's mind, meeting the steady, serious gaze of her upperclassman as the tension between them hangs in the air. She stands in the secluded area, her head bowed as she waits for the other girl to speak. The silence is heavy, but it is suddenly shattered by a sharp, familiar voice calling out from the distance. Akira approaches rapidly, his expression stern as he demands to know what has happened. He had seen them heading toward the backyard and felt compelled to intervene, warning the taller girl not to cause any more trouble. Shizuka quickly steps in to de-escalate the situation, explaining that she had come willingly because there was something important that needed to be said. In response to the tension, the stoic girl reaches into her uniform and produces a folded piece of paper. This, she explains, is the reason behind her recent behavior, a letter from a group calling themselves the Eradication Committee that labels a student named Amori as an enemy and demands the total isolation and humiliation of Shizuka. The sight of the hateful message leaves both of them reeling in disbelief. Akira's eyes widen with a mix of confusion and growing rage as he processes the sheer malice written on the page. It is a direct order to target her, a realization that sends a chill through the air. They stand together, staring at the evidence of a calculated campaign of harassment designed to break her spirit. His anger boils over at the absurdity of the group's name, but his focus shifts when she presents a second item, a photograph. It depicts a group of students, a relic from a time that someone is now using as a weapon. She reveals the true nature of the coercion, explaining that this specific image was being used to blackmail her. The circle around her face in the photo serves as a silent threat, a reminder that her past or her reputation is at the mercy of whoever sent the letter. Looking down at the ground, the smaller girl asks for the origin of these items. The explanation is simple yet chilling. The letter and the photograph appeared in a shoe locker 2 weeks prior, a quiet intrusion into her daily life. This pressure was what led to the incident in the home economics classroom. A moment of weakness where she felt she had no choice but to comply with the demands of her anonymous tormentors. She stands tall now, admitting the indisputable truth that she was manipulated into the bullying. While she offers a sincere apology for her actions, the revelation of a hidden hand orchestrating the conflict changes everything. She listens as Shizuka admits she can't recall ever being the target of such deep resentment. Shizuka's expression is one of genuine confusion, her brow slightly furrowed as she searches her memories for a reason why someone would go to such lengths to hurt her. The elegant young woman remains silent, her gaze drifting downward as she reflects on the nature of human interaction. She considers how easily one can unintentionally wound another, oblivious to the pain they might be causing, much like the situation she herself had been forced into. Turning her attention back to the physical evidence, she examines the letter and the group photograph alongside Shizuka. She points out a chilling detail. The sender clearly possesses intimate knowledge of her elementary school days, despite her choosing a distant high school to escape her past. She wonders aloud if the culprit was careless enough to leave a fingerprint behind. As the gravity of the situation settles, Akira suggests involving the police, but she remains skeptical. She reasons that whoever orchestrated this was likely meticulous enough to wear gloves, leaving no such obvious trail for the authorities to follow. The conversation shifts as they recall other strange occurrences, specifically how a student named Maeda had also been manipulated through a letter. In that instance, the mysterious sender had commanded Maeda to steal Akira's student identification card, suggesting a broader, more calculated pattern of harassment. Akira ponders the motive, questioning why someone like Akagi would have any interest in Shizuka's past, or why he would target her at all. Shizuka's eyes suddenly widen in a moment of sharp realization, an important detail having previously slipped her mind. Looking down at their feet as they stand together, she tentatively brings up their time at the riverside the other day. She suggests that perhaps their being seen together triggered something, though a sense of unease lingers, as if some pieces of the puzzle still don't quite fit. They continue to analyze Akagi's character, with the tall blonde girl noting that while he is undeniably cruel, he lacks the sophistication for such a complex scheme, usually preferring direct violence. Akira then drops a bombshell, revealing that Akagi has already been taken into police custody. He explains further that Akagi, unlike the more elusive Maeda, actually confessed to the extortion charges. While this provides some answers, it only deepens the mystery of who is truly pulling the strings from the shadows. Shizuka is left reeling by the news of the correspondence between Akagi and Maeda. The mention of a new name, a Maeda from Futaba who allegedly proposed the idea to Akagi via letter, leaves her questioning if this is merely another layer of deception or a genuine lead. She listens intently as the group pieces together the mystery. Amori questions if Akagi was taking orders from someone other than Maeda, while Takamine observes that this marks the third letter they've encountered so far. The weight of the situation begins to press down on her, leading to a spiral of dark thoughts. She wonders what kind of person would orchestrate such a scheme and fears that they are all dancing in the palm of an unknown enemy's hand, the stress manifesting as a sharp pain behind her eyes. A heavy silence falls over the group as they process the implications. Akira clenches his teeth, the gravity of the conspiracy hanging thick in the air. The tension is suddenly broken when Takamine bluntly asks if the two of them are officially a couple. The question catches her completely off guard, sending her into a frantic state of confusion as she wonders how to respond with him standing right there. He doesn't hesitate, confirming their relationship with a bluntness that leaves her speechless. She hadn't expected him to be so direct, especially given the circumstances. Seeing their reaction, Takamine and Amori decide to head out, offering a casual farewell. They seem content as long as the pair is happy, leaving her to stammer out excuses about how new the relationship actually is. As their friends disappear into the distance, he turns his attention back to the threat at hand. He warns her to remain vigilant, still unsettled by the ease with which the blackmailer's letters find their mark. She responds with a radiant, fearless smile, brushing off his concerns. Her confidence is bolstered by his presence, and she declares that she has nothing to fear as long as he is by her side. A confident smirk plays on his lips as he vows to protect her. He promises to hunt down and crush anyone who dares to lay a finger on her, a sentiment that fills her with a renewed sense of resolve. They share a moment of silent understanding, their bond forged in the face of adversity. While he views her as his one and only Azura, she resolves that she will never run away from the challenges ahead, no matter what may happen. Akira and Shizuka arrive at a common area to eat because of the rain. The atmosphere is thick with the hushed whispers of their classmates, who are stunned to see the two together. Akira offers a casual greeting, seemingly unfazed by the attention. Beside him, she is a portrait of bashful anxiety, her face flushed a deep crimson. The reality of their public debut is far more overwhelming than she had anticipated, making every step feel like an ordeal of embarrassment. Seeking a distraction, she eagerly opens the bento box to reveal a meticulously prepared seaweed lunch. A beautifully carved lotus root flower sits atop the dark bed of nori, a small but elegant detail that catches her eye immediately. She asks if the flower was his handiwork, and he confirms it with a modest shrug, explaining he wanted to add a bit of flair to the simple meal. Touched by his thoughtfulness, she offers a silent prayer of thanks before they begin their meal together. As she takes her first bite, the rich flavor of bonito flakes fills her mouth. It is exactly the kind of hearty, comforting taste she was hoping for, and she can't help but savor the generous portion he included. Her delight only grows when she discovers a hidden layer of tuna mayo tucked within the rice. The unexpected combination is a perfect surprise, bringing a bright smile to her face as she enjoys the treat. He watches her eat, mentioning that he might try his hand at preparing this himself in the future. He admits that whenever he's at a convenience store, he finds himself gravitating toward the classic bonito and tuna mayo flavors, which inspired today's lunch. They both agree that the fried seaweed wraps are a highlight, providing a satisfying crunch that complements the rest of the meal. It's a combination that perfectly suits his tastes, and she finds herself in complete, joyful agreement. He goes on to explain the secret behind the ham and eggs, revealing they were prepared quickly in a microwave. He even shares a culinary tip about poking the yolk with a toothpick to prevent it from bursting, a detail she promises to keep in mind for her own cooking. However, the bubble of their private meal is soon pricked as she notices the lingering stares of those around them. She realizes with a start that she had completely lost herself in the rhythm of their conversation, momentarily forgetting the public spectacle they have become. She acknowledges his observation that the initial fervor of their peers has died down, yet a lingering unease remains. Akira notes the quiet, but Shizuka's eyes dart around the room, searching for a source of discomfort she can't quite name. Despite the apparent normalcy, she can't shake the sensation of being observed. She scans the room, noting that while none of their classmates are looking their way, the feeling of a hidden gaze persists, heavy and unsettling. Her eyes drift upward, settling on a fire alarm mounted on the ceiling. A memory flickers. It bears a striking resemblance to the one she noticed on the rooftop the other day, a detail that suddenly feels significant. Upon closer inspection, the device reveals its secrets. While it mimics the standard alarms in the hallway, the geometry is subtly flawed, a discrepancy that only someone looking for it would notice. A sudden clarity washes over her as the disparate clues begin to align. The puzzle pieces of the recent strange occurrences are finally clicking into place within her mind. She recalls a news report about illicit surveillance, specifically hidden cameras disguised as fire alarms. This realization ties everything together. The letters sent to Takamine, Maeda, and Akagi, and the perpetrator's uncanny ability to dig up secrets and infiltrate school lockers. The implications are chilling, leading her to wonder why she was chosen as a target and who could possibly be behind such a calculated scheme. She envisions a shadowy figure, someone capable of overcoming any obstacle to maintain their watch. Turning back to her companion, she voices her realization with a newfound certainty. She tells him that she believes she has finally discovered the source of the mysterious letters. As they walk together through the school grounds, she lays out her theory in detail. The weight of her discovery hangs in the air, a stark contrast to the mundane surroundings of the campus. Even as she speaks, she worries that her conclusions sound like the ramblings of a delusional mind. Yet, he doesn't dismiss her. Instead, he listens with a grave intensity, acknowledging the terrifying possibility that an obsession this deep could truly exist. She listens intently as he processes her discovery, a confident smirk playing on his lips. He reasons that if her theory about the surveillance is correct, then catching the culprit in the middle of their illicit activities should be straightforward. As they walk together through the quiet streets, he points ahead with a firm resolve, declaring that they will make the necessary preparations to spring their trap. She nods in agreement, her voice steady as she commits to the plan, the two of them now united in their mission to expose the truth. On the school rooftop, Shizuka's eyes light up as Akira presents his latest culinary creation, a thick, grilled hamburger. He promises her it will hit the spot, and her excitement is palpable as she marvels at the unexpected meal, wondering how he managed to prepare such a dish. She takes a massive, enthusiastic bite, her cheeks puffing out as she savors the flavor. The sheer joy of the meal overcomes her, and she muffledly exclaims how delicious it is, her face radiating pure bliss. As she continues to eat, she notes the perfect harmony between the teriyaki-flavored patty and the sharp tang of the mustard mayonnaise. The combination is even better than she imagined, each ingredient complementing the other perfectly. He watches her enjoy the food, explaining the craft behind it. The buns were carved from a fresh loaf of bread and lightly toasted, while the patty itself is a clever blend of ground meat and tofu, ensuring the meal is satisfying without being overly heavy. She recalls seeing him purchase those very ingredients at the supermarket the previous day, though she never suspected they would be transformed into such a lovely dish. With the meal finished, he stands up, his expression shifting from casual chef to someone with a serious task at hand. He informs her that he needs to step away for a short while, promising to return in 5 minutes unless something unexpected occurs. His tone is calm, but there's an underlying weight to his departure that suggests he is heading into a confrontation. Sensing the gravity of the situation, she looks at him with a determined gaze, insisting that if he doesn't return within that time frame, she will come looking for him. He pauses, meeting her eyes with a silent, serious acknowledgement before turning to leave. Now alone on the roof, she stares down at the remaining half of her burger, the flavor suddenly lost to the growing knot of anxiety in her stomach. She realizes that by eating the meal as they usually do, they are acting as bait to lure out a culprit, and Akira is heading straight toward the trap. The minutes tick by slowly until the 5-minute mark passes without any sign of his return. Realizing that something must have gone wrong, She springs into action, her footsteps echoing through the quiet school corridors as she sprints toward the location he mentioned. She reaches the doorway and slides it open, only to be met with the sound of a heated confrontation. Inside, the atmosphere is thick with tension as a voice roars in anger, accusing someone of committing a crime, while she stands frozen, witnessing Akira facing off against Kurita-sensei. She watches in silence as the teacher adjusts his collar, his expression a mixture of exhaustion and a strange, simmering intensity. As the confrontation escalates, the student beside her demands the truth, accusing Kurita-sensei of secret surveillance. The educator doesn't deny it, admitting he was aware of the cameras hidden in the classroom and on the rooftop, and even the letters that had been sent. He suddenly clutches his chest, his gaze fixed on Shizuka as he confesses a twisted motivation. He did it all because he liked her. He continues his frantic explanation, describing how he was irresistibly drawn to the sight of her eating with such uninhibited pleasure, finding a strange beauty in the way she would stuff her mouth to the brim with no hesitation. This obsession grew as he watched her find joy in even the simplest junk food, a sight that brought him a perverse sense of satisfaction even while he remained hidden in the shadows. However, his expression darkens as he turns his resentment toward Akira, claiming that everything changed once the boy entered the picture. He brandishes a digital screen showing the two of them sharing a meal, shouting in frustration that the healthy, vegetable-heavy food they were eating was nothing like the ideal way of eating he had envisioned. In his warped logic, he believed he had to restore her charm by any means necessary, having concluded that her excessive eating was a coping mechanism for stress that he needed to trigger. He points out that her consumption only increased once Takamine became involved, using the girl's own habits as evidence for his twisted theory that more stress equaled more of the beauty he craved. He is met with the student's boiling fury as a hand seizes his collar. The realization has dawned that the teacher used his authority to harass and manipulate them, sending letters and digging into their pasts just to force the girl back into his desired state. He bellows with a voice thick with rage, demanding to know how the man before him could be so cruel. He accuses the teacher of manipulating others, even forcing Takamine to hurt Shizuka, all for the twisted goal of watching the girl lose control of her appetite and eat until she breaks. The man doesn't deny it, calmly admitting that he even orchestrated the involvement of Maeda and Akagi to ensnare the young man. Shizuka stands by, her eyes wide with the horror of this revelation as the depth of the manipulation becomes clear. He continues his cold explanation, revealing how he leveraged knowledge of a past altercation with students from Casamino to further his schemes. The young man's grip on the teacher's collar tightens, his teeth bared in a snarl of pure loathing. Unable to contain his fury any longer, he lashes out with a powerful strike that sends the teacher reeling backward. Shizuka cries out in alarm as the others watch the sudden explosion of violence in stunned silence. She rushes forward, desperate to pull him away before he does more damage. He remains focused on the fallen man, cursing the suffering inflicted on their classmates for such a petty, selfish whim. Tears stream down her face as she struggles to comprehend why anyone would go to such lengths for something so trivial. He stands his ground, declaring that while he cares nothing for her eating habits, he cannot forgive the pain the teacher has caused everyone involved. Slumped on the floor, the teacher begins a hollow monologue about the sheer number of meals a person consumes in a lifetime. He then reveals a grim truth. His own stomach has been surgically removed, leaving him unable to partake in that fundamental human experience. His voice rises in a desperate, cracked plea as he describes the agony of having tens of thousands of meals left in his life that he can never enjoy. He is consumed by a hunger that his body physically rejects, a torture of endless frustration that has driven him to madness. He looks up with a haunting, wide-eyed expression, explaining that he sought vicarious satisfaction by watching others eat, much like those who obsess over videos of gluttony online. He points a finger, claiming that the young man is no different from him in his observations of the girl. She refuses to let the comparison stand, her voice ringing out with absolute conviction. She shouts that he is entirely wrong, asserting that while the teacher only saw her as a vessel for food, the boy she cares for sees her as a whole person, regardless of whether she is eating or not. She stands firm, her voice steady as she defends the boy beside her, making it clear that he is nothing like the man who stands before them, a man consumed only by his own selfish desires. In response to her sharp rebuke, the disgraced teacher slowly rises from the floor, prompting a suspicious inquiry from the young man about whether he intends to flee the consequences of his actions. He dismisses the accusation with a weary sigh, asserting his maturity and his intent to face the music by going where he must and speaking the truth, finally accepting the weight of his responsibilities. As the man departs, she turns to her companion with a soft expression, offering her gratitude for the words he spoke in her defense, though he humbly insists he was merely echoing the truths she had already voiced. A gentle, knowing smile spreads across her face as she reminds him of his own admission, that he has found himself drawn to her, a fact she playfully suggests he couldn't possibly have forgotten. He gazes back at her, his usual intensity softened by the weight of her words and the quiet resolution of the moment. Standing close together in the fading light of the room, he confirms that such a thing would be impossible to forget, acknowledging with a sense of finality that their long ordeal has finally reached its end. Outside the school walls, the silence is shattered by the rhythmic flashing of emergency lights as a police cruiser pulls into the courtyard, drawing the curious and startled gazes of students nearby. Within the halls, the news spreads like wildfire, with classmates like the observant boy in glasses wondering aloud if the school's notorious delinquent has once again found himself at the center of a violent confrontation. Amidst the swirling rumors and the chaos of the investigation, she remains calm, knowing the truth of what transpired. The chapter of the obsessed teacher concludes with his formal arrest, leaving the echoes of his madness behind. She observed the school hallways buzzing with whispers for several days following the arrest. Students gathered in small groups, their hushed conversations filling the air as the shock of the incident slowly began to permeate the student body. They eventually stopped dwelling on the matter as the memory of the scandal began to recede from their minds. With the looming pressure of semester finals taking precedence, the collective focus shifted from past drama to the immediate academic challenges ahead. They were finally able to reclaim their quiet moments together, finding solace in their shared meals on the rooftop. The chaos of the previous weeks felt like a distant memory as they enjoyed the simple comfort of each other's company, returning at last to the tranquility of their everyday existence. September 1st marks the beginning of the second semester. As students fill the hallways, a young man with glasses is nearly knocked off balance by a passing student who offers a quick, casual apology. His companions watch the stranger walk away, questioning if the unfamiliar face belongs to a new transfer student. He brushes off their concern, assuring them he is perfectly fine despite the sudden collision. The mundane morning is shattered when a girl approaches with a soft greeting. He recoils in genuine shock, his eyes wide as he frantically asks if she has fallen ill or if something terrible has happened to her. She stands before him, radiating a new confidence, her figure significantly slimmer than it was before the summer break. While she laughs off his alarm, the surrounding students can't help but whisper in disbelief at her dramatic physical transformation. Their conversation is interrupted by the arrival of a poised, long-haired girl who immediately zeroes in on the change. She exclaims at the sheer scale of the transformation, leaving the smaller girl to offer a shy, slightly embarrassed chuckle. They delve into the details of her success, with the girl crediting a series of intense workout videos she had been recommended. She admits the routine was grueling, but the results displayed on her phone screen prove the effort was well worth the struggle. Her friend looks on with newfound respect, acknowledging the sheer willpower required to see such a difficult task through to the end. She praises the girl's grit, impressed that she didn't give up when things got tough. With a modest nod, she confirms that this summer marked the very first time in her life she committed to a serious diet. The two girls walk together, the weight of the achievement hanging in the air between them. Deep down, she reflects on her motivations, realizing that while the external pressure from others had faded, her internal desire for change remained as strong as ever. Her thoughts drift back to her feelings for a certain boy, realizing she wanted to become a version of herself she could truly love. Remembering his kind words about liking her, she felt driven to match the person she was when they first met with the person she wanted to be. She stands with her friend as the first semester draws to a close in July, seeking advice on a new path. When the topic of a specific dieting method arises, her companion admits to having extensive knowledge on the subject, offering a starting point for the journey ahead. She stares ahead with a mix of trepidation and resolve, fully aware that the road will be arduous. The warning is clear. This transformation will not come easily, and the mental toll will be just as significant as the physical one. She begins the regimen with the fundamentals of calorie restriction, demanding the total abandonment of greasy foods and sugary snacks in favor of balanced nutrition. This dietary shift is paired with a rigorous schedule of strength training during the daylight hours, emphasizing that limiting meals alone is insufficient for true change. By the time evening falls, she is already gasping for air, her body protesting after only 5 minutes of jogging through the quiet streets. Just as her resolve begins to waver, a familiar figure appears at her side, offering a bottle of water and the silent encouragement she needs to continue. He matches her pace, promising to accompany her on these runs and even help with the grocery shopping for her new diet. She admits that his presence is the only reason she has managed to maintain this grueling routine, finding strength in their shared effort. She still faces the daily struggle, especially when the rich, savory aroma of miso and sesame wafts from a local ramen shop. Closing her eyes, she is momentarily lost in the scent of a meal she hasn't allowed herself to enjoy in weeks, feeling the constant pull of temptation. Her mouth waters as she battles the intense craving, reminding herself of the progress she has made and the sheer effort she has invested. The internal conflict is visible on her face, a desperate fight between her hunger and her long-term goals. He notices her lingering gaze and gently urges her to stay strong, reminding her that the sacrifice is necessary. His steady presence acts as an anchor, pulling her away from the allure of the shop and back toward her commitment. With a confident smile and a thumbs up, he invites her to his home the following day, promising to prepare a suitable lunch for her. She is caught off guard by the invitation, her cheeks flushing as she processes the unexpected gesture of support. The next day, the sun shines brightly over the apartment complex where the meeting is set to take place. As she approaches the building, a cheerful greeting rings out, signaling the start of another day in her transformative summer. She is greeted warmly by a young girl named Sakura, who introduces herself as Akira's little sister. The girl is energetic and welcoming, a stark contrast to Akira's more stoic nature. In the background, Akira announces that he has just finished preparing their meal, inviting them to come and eat while it's fresh. Because of his efforts, a steaming bowl of tan men is placed before her. The aroma of sesame fills the air, and she realizes it is exactly what she had been craving. With a look of pure anticipation, she prepares to dive into the dish, her hunger finally getting the better of her. Taking her first bite, she is immediately struck by the rich, smooth flavor of the miso and sesame. The noodles are perfectly coated in a spicy miso meat sauce, creating a harmony of taste that leaves her beaming with satisfaction. This, she thinks, is exactly how ramen should be, savoring the depth of the broth. Despite her enjoyment, she suddenly remembers her diet and expresses concern about finishing the entire bowl, including the delicious soup. He quickly reassures her, suggesting that for this specific meal, she will be perfectly fine and shouldn't worry about the calories just this once. He then begins to break down the recipe, explaining that the soup's base is a combination of water, chicken broth, miso, and ground sesame. Crucially, he points out that he used soy milk as the primary liquid, which significantly reduces the oil content compared to traditional recipes, making it much healthier. Continuing his explanation, he describes how the miso meat was prepared by frying ground meat with garlic, ginger, and chili bean paste. She listens intently, amazed that such simple steps and careful ingredient choices could result in such an authentic and complex flavor profile. As she continues to eat, Sakura adds another detail, revealing that the noodles themselves are a low-carb substitute. She explains a specific technique of freezing and then thawing the noodles under running water to ensure they maintain a firm, satisfying texture despite being a healthier alternative. This revelation makes her feel as though she is part of a culinary science experiment. He pulls out his phone to show her the source of his knowledge, explaining that the internet is full of these kinds of clever life hacks for healthy eating that don't sacrifice taste. While they share the meal, she muses on how much of modern online discourse seems to revolve around either the joy of cooking or the discipline of dieting. It is a strange duality that they are currently navigating together in this quiet kitchen. She continues to savor every bite, caught between her goal of losing weight and her genuine love for delicious food. When she jokingly asks if the low-calorie count means she can have unlimited noodle refills, he offers a playful warning that there are still limits to everything, even healthy ramen. She finishes her meal with a grateful smile, announcing her intention to resume her jogging routine later that afternoon. As she reflects on the meal, she acknowledges the harsh reality of dieting, realizing that without help, she would have easily succumbed to the allure of a bowl of ramen. She finally understands the weight of the perseverance required, a sentiment previously shared by another. This realization brings a new perspective on her past interactions, as she begins to understand why her lighthearted attitude might have been perceived as irritating to someone like Takamine, who had been working so much harder. Her thoughts are interrupted by the younger girl, who eagerly suggests they dive into the treats brought as a gift. While the young man cautions against comparing one person's hardships to another's, she can't help but agree with the sentiment of acknowledging everyone's individual effort. With renewed enthusiasm, she shares her secret philosophy. The key to a successful diet is treating oneself in moderation, especially when the treat in question is practically calorie-free. Seeing her excitement, the young man offers a sheepish apology for his sister's boisterous nature, but she quickly dismisses his concerns with a cheerful laugh. Looking down at the shimmering dessert, she makes a mental pact to extend her run today to balance the indulgence, all while marveling at the delightful company of his sister. True to her word, she finds herself side by side with him on the pavement, noticing with a sense of pride that the distance she can cover without losing her breath has grown significantly since she first started. The leaves rustle overhead as the season progresses, marking the successful completion of a summer-long commitment to her new lifestyle. With the heat of summer fading into memory, the focus shifts back to the familiar corridors of the school, signaling the start of a new chapter. Shizuka stands in the school hallway, her transformation over the summer drawing immediate attention. Whispers ripple through the air as classmates struggle to reconcile this slender, radiant girl with the person they remember. She offers a polite, slightly strained smile, fully aware that every word of their surprised commentary is reaching her ears. Nearby, Amori adjusts his glasses while a fellow student marvels at the change, suggesting that Amori should make a move now that she is so striking. He quickly shuts down the idea, reminding his friend that her heart is already claimed by her one and only boyfriend. The subject of those rumors, Akira, trudges into view, looking drained by the formalities of the school's opening ceremony. Despite his sluggish demeanor, his presence is commanding, prompting hushed, intimidated whispers of Ajura from the surrounding students as Shizuka patiently waits for him to set down his bag. As she stands there, the gossip intensifies, with students comparing her ethereal new look to a deity of compassion, while others are simply baffled by her identity. The contrast between her gentle aura and the intense reputation of the boy she is waiting for creates a stir throughout the corridor. He finally reaches her side, offering a brief word of thanks for her patience. As they prepare to head out, a quiet resolve settles between them. Regardless of the whispers or the labels the school might try to place on them, the bond they share remains unshakable. Leading the way, he suggests they retreat to the quiet of the rooftop to escape the prying eyes of their peers. She follows closely behind, her name a soft anchor in the bustling hallway as they move through the crowd together. He notices the bento she is carrying and realizes with a start that it has been over a month since they last shared a meal like this. The simple routine of their school days is finally returning, bringing a sense of normalcy back to their lives. She suddenly pauses, clutching at the waistband of her skirt with a flustered expression. The success of her summer fitness routine has left her clothes far too large, and she realizes too late that she should have worn a belt to keep the fabric from slipping down. Noticing her struggle, he suggests that if the fit is truly that far off, She should simply invest in a new uniform. They step through the door to the roof, the sound of the latch clicking shut behind them as they leave the noise of the school interior. They step out into the open air, where a refreshing breeze greets them under a clear sky. Though only a few weeks have passed since they were last here, the familiar setting feels deeply nostalgic, marking a peaceful start to their new term together. She opens the lid with anticipation, her eyes wide with wonder at what the meal might hold. This was always the moment she looked forward to most. Inside the box, the rice balls are neatly arranged, wrapped in dark leaves. He confirms they are the miso meat variety, the very recipe she had once shared with him. Taking a bite, she is immediately struck by the rich flavors. He explains that he added his own touch, sesame oil and spicy ground meat, hoping the sharp taste of shredded ginger would be to her liking. She finds the balance of flavors superior even to her own creations, her cheeks flushed with satisfaction. He can't help but chuckle at her enthusiastic reaction, even as they joke about the simple nature of the meal. He looks away, a slight blush creeping onto his face as she recalls their first encounter back in May. At the time, his intense gaze had made her fear he wanted to grind her into meat, a far cry from the gentle person sitting before her now. She smiles brightly, realizing that those early, awkward moments were the foundation of their current bond. To her, the savory flavor has become the very taste of their first love. They share a light-hearted laugh, though he playfully insists there is nothing romantic about being associated with ground meat. While she continues to enjoy the meal, praising the wonderful taste, he softly calls out her name, his tone shifting to something more serious. He suddenly leans in, catching her off guard as he presses his lips against hers. Her eyes widen in shock, the half-eaten meal momentarily forgotten in her hands. In the quiet of the rooftop, the world seems to narrow down to just the two of them. Their feet stand close together as the unexpected kiss lingers, marking a new depth in their relationship. She is frozen in time as his lips meet hers, his hand gently cupping her cheek to steady the moment. It is a tender, unexpected collision that halts the world around them. As he pulls back slightly, she can only utter a faint sound of confusion, her face flushing a deep crimson. The reality of what just happened begins to sink in, leaving her breathless and wide-eyed. However, the romantic atmosphere is quickly shattered when he bluntly remarks that she reeks of sauce. Indignant, she shouts in protest, unable to believe that such a tactless comment followed their very first kiss. Despite the insult, he breaks into a genuine laugh, finding the absurdity of the situation perfectly fitting for them. She finds herself joining in, marveling at the fact that they have reached a point where they can share such lighthearted laughter together. Looking at him, she realizes how much they have both evolved, and she feels a surge of determination to keep moving forward together. The bond between them has strengthened, forged through shared meals and these honest, messy moments. A quiet question lingers in her mind as she recalls his promise to keep making bento for her. She wonders just how long he intends to maintain this ritual, searching his face for a hint of what the future holds for their strange arrangement. Clutching the empty bento box in her lap, she admits to herself that the answer is a mystery to both of them. For now, the uncertainty doesn't feel like a burden, but rather a path they have yet to walk side by side. As they prepare to leave the rooftop, she takes his hand and offers a bright, hopeful smile. With a gentle request, she asks that they eat together again tomorrow, and the day after that, cementing their new beginning. The morning begins with the simple ritual of breakfast. A bowl of miso soup sits beside a plate of rice topped with a fried egg, as a stream of dark soy sauce is carefully drizzled over the yolk. In the background, the morning news provides a steady hum of information to start the day. He sits at the table, focused on his meal, while the television transitions to a segment on the latest beauty trends. The sounds of the broadcast fill the quiet room as he takes a bite, his attention momentarily caught by the screen. Continuing his breakfast, he hums in quiet approval of the food, finding it to be exactly what a morning requires. On the screen, the announcer introduces Aika, a model who is rapidly gaining popularity, as the focus of the next autumn product showcase. The television displays the model promoting a new lipstick with an autumn-like fragrance of tea olive, noting its affordable price and cute packaging. Watching intently, the young girl beside him beams with admiration, her eyes sparkling as she gushes over how tiny and cute the model's face is. He looks on, his expression neutral as he processes the mention of the changing seasons. As they sit together, she explains the logic of the fashion world, noting that summer collections are showcased early so people can prepare, even if the items won't be used for a month. He remains skeptical, pointing out that it's over 30 degrees outside and feels far too early to be thinking about autumn. She dismisses his practicality with a playful sigh, suggesting that he'll surely be getting a birthday present for Shizuka next year. He looks at her with a blank expression, clearly not following the leap in her logic. He pauses, a look of genuine curiosity crossing his face as he wonders if Shizuka would even be happy with that sort of thing. His companion sighs, telling him he needs to be a little more understanding of such matters. The conversation takes a sharper turn when she mentions that it is currently July and asks if he even knows when the birthday is, noting that the topic had come up just the day before. He freezes, the realization of the current date finally sinking in. A wave of pure shock washes over him, his face draining of color as the gravity of the situation hits. The horrifying thought that he let her birthday pass by without a single gesture leaves him paralyzed with regret. He tries to rationalize the situation, thinking that even if her birthday has passed, there are still opportunities like Christmas to give her a gift. However, the weight of the missed milestone lingers in his mind as he watches her cheerful expression, realizing that the window for a timely celebration has long since closed. Later, sitting in solitude, he reflects on the timeline of their relationship. They only started dating in July, and back in April and May, they weren't nearly as close. Despite this logical excuse, the blunt realization that he completely failed to acknowledge her special day hits him hard, leaving him feeling like he truly messed up. The next day brings a fresh start as she opens her lunch with genuine excitement. Discovering a sandwich inside, her face lights up with a bright, expectant smile, her eyes wide with anticipation for the meal ahead as she wonders what delights he has prepared for her today. As she takes a large, satisfying bite, he watches her with a mix of affection and amusement. He marvels at how she can have such a sparkling, joyful reaction to every single item in her bento, realizing just how much he has come to look forward to seeing that specific look of pure happiness on her face. She continues to rave about the meal, describing the perfect crunch of the bread and the juiciness of the vegetables with infectious enthusiasm. Meanwhile, he is locked in an internal struggle, debating whether to finally ask her about a birthday gift or if it would be better to just let it go, fearing she might politely decline out of modesty if he brings it up so late. Noticing his troubled expression, she pauses her meal to ask why he looks so grumpy. He is momentarily stunned into silence, his eyes fixed on a small smudge of sauce stuck to the corner of her mouth, unsure of how to respond to her concern while being so distracted by her presence. She breaks into a light-hearted laugh upon realizing her mess, quickly wiping it away while continuing to munch on her sandwich. Seeing her so carefree and radiant, he finds himself completely overwhelmed by her charm, his heart racing as he thinks about how incredibly cute she is in this simple, everyday moment. This sudden wave of affection only adds to his mental chaos, and he clutches his head in a fit of internal frustration. He scolds himself for getting distracted, trying to force his brain to focus on the task at hand, finding a way to bring up the missed birthday present without making things awkward or ruining the mood. Finally, he musters the courage to speak, tentatively starting to mention the gift while they sit together on a bench. She looks at him with a puzzled expression, her head tilted slightly as she fails to grasp the context of his sudden, vague statement, wondering what he could possibly be referring to. Before he can explain further, she suddenly remembers her next class and hops up, thanking him for the great food as she rushes off toward the gym for PE. He reaches out a hand in a desperate attempt to stop her, but she is already gone, leaving him standing there in a state of utter confusion and missed opportunity. He couldn't shake the nagging thought that there was something specific she had wanted for her birthday, a detail he had somehow overlooked in his haste. As he walked down the quiet school corridor, his head bowed in contemplation, the internal debate continued on whether a direct approach would be the most effective way to bridge the growing distance between them. Nearby, Takamine and another student observed him from a distance, whispering about how his peculiar way of showing concern might actually be centered around the missing birthday gift, wondering if he even realized how transparent his anxiety had become. He eventually stepped into the room, his presence immediately drawing their attention. While one girl labeled him a troublemaker, he bluntly questioned why they were so preoccupied with Shizuka's affairs, his frustration bubbling to the surface. The realization that his failure to provide a gift was genuinely weighing on her mind began to sink in, leaving him feeling a heavy sense of regret. He tried to rationalize a plan, imagining that he could simply bring it up during their walk home and suggest a shopping trip, even as he pictured her venting her frustrations to her circle of friends about his perceived thoughtlessness. However, when he finally saw her, she offered a polite but firm apology, explaining that she had errands to run and suggesting that he head home without her, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Stunned by the unexpected rejection, he trudged away alone, the painful suspicion that she was intentionally avoiding him beginning to take root in his mind. Every step felt heavier than the last as he wallowed in self-pity, convinced that his clumsy attempts to make amends were only making things worse. His aimless wandering eventually brought him past a large outdoor screen where Aiko was promoting a new autumn fragrance. The sight sparked a sudden idea that a high-quality lipstick might be the perfect peace offering to mend their fractured bond. He steps into the brightly lit cosmetics department, feeling like an intruder in a world of perfumes and powders. His eyes lock onto the display he saw earlier, the autumn fragrance lipstick shimmering under the spotlights. It seems like the perfect solution, if only he can muster the courage to buy it. Before he can even reach for it, a cheerful voice chirps from behind, startling him. A shop assistant has appeared, as if from nowhere, asking with a knowing smile if that specific product caught his eye. The young man stammers a confirmation, admitting it's intended as a gift. His heart sinks when she explains that the popular item is currently out of stock, though she quickly pivots, offering to suggest alternatives that might fit his budget. He stares at her, completely out of his depth as she continues to list other products. Realizing he is hopelessly out of his element, he politely declines her further help, deciding it's better to check elsewhere. As he beats a hasty retreat, the assistant calls out after him, but he's already focused on his own ignorance, lamenting that he knows absolutely nothing about the world of makeup. He wanders through the crowded mall, his shoulders slumped in defeat. The weight of his indecision grows as he wonders if he should have just swallowed his pride and accepted the assistant's advice after all. A sudden thought stops him in his tracks. He looks around at the stylish shoppers, feeling a pang of inadequacy. He realizes he simply isn't the type of person who can navigate these high-end stores with any kind of grace or confidence. His gaze drifts to a nearby display of sleek, professional-grade knives. For a moment, he imagines how much he would appreciate such a practical gift, but the image of Shizuka's confused face quickly dispels the idea. He knows it's not what she wants. Lost in his own frustration, he accidentally collides with another shopper. They both offer quick, clipped apologies, but as he turns to continue on his way, A sense of irritation at his own clumsiness boils over. The irritation vanishes instantly when he realizes the person he bumped into is Shizuka herself. They stand frozen, the air thick with surprise, as she questions his presence in the mall. He fumbles for words, eventually admitting he was searching for a birthday gift he failed to give her earlier. To his utter shock, a warm smile spreads across her face as she confesses that she is there for the exact same reason. The tension that had been building between them dissolves into a shared, slightly embarrassed realization. They are both just trying to find a way back to each other. She begins by questioning if it's too early to prepare, noting that his birthday is still more than 2 weeks away. Continuing her explanation, she admits she only learned the date by chance from Sakura the day before, but felt compelled to act because of how much he looks after her. Her voice softens as she makes a vulnerable confession, revealing that he is the first person she has ever truly fallen in love with. However, the weight of the moment quickly becomes too much, and she offers a flustered apology for being overly serious. He listens with a growing sense of guilt, expressing that he feels bad for the immense effort she is putting in when he has yet to do anything in return. She quickly dismisses his concerns with a bright smile, insisting he shouldn't worry, while he silently reflects on the fact that he never even mentioned his birthday, realizing his own lack of communication was the source of her anxiety. As they stand before a shelf of ceramic mugs, he asks if her original plan was to surprise him, prompting her to wonder if she should just head home now that the secret is out. She explains that after consulting with Hikari and their other friends, she decided that tableware or cooking utensils would be a thoughtful choice, given his passion for cooking. While he thinks to himself that he would be overjoyed with any gift she chose, she remains hesitant, worrying that an amateur's choice might be problematic or fail to match his specific preferences. Turning the question back to him, she asks if he has already purchased a gift, only for him to admit that he is currently facing the exact same dilemma. A playful smile returns to her face as she suggests they find something they can both use, concluding that their unexpected meeting in the store must be a stroke of fate. She listens as he admits that something had caught his eye a while back, a thought that had been lingering in his mind. 2 weeks pass before he finally approaches her outside the school building, extending a paper gift bag. He acknowledges the timing is a bit late, but offers it as a sincere birthday gesture, his expression softening as he hands it over. Accepting the gift with a bright smile, she expresses her gratitude, though she reminds him that the day is technically his birthday as well. She playfully encourages him to open the gift she has for him too, teasingly noting that his zodiac sign, Virgo, seems to fit his surprisingly thoughtful nature. Together, they reveal the contents of their packages, a pair of matching, circular bentwood lunchboxes. He expresses relief that he managed to find something suitable, while she looks on with genuine delight at the coordinated set. While she admires the elegant craftsmanship of the exterior, she remarks that the true value lies in what is kept inside. He explains his reasoning, admitting it had bothered him to see her using a hand-me-down from Sakura, and he wanted her to have a dedicated set of her own that they could use together. Upon lifting the lids, the fragrant aroma of mushroom rice wafts upward, filling the air with a savory, earthy scent. He observes that traditional Japanese cuisine is the perfect accompaniment for the aesthetic of bentwood boxes. She agrees, pointing out how the pumpkin and minced meat dishes provide a distinct autumnal feel that complements the wood's natural aura perfectly. With a joyful exclamation, she prepares to dig in, savoring the first bite with a look of pure bliss. She reflects on how the experience of eating from matching containers adds a unique and special touch to their shared meal, making the food taste even better. Her attention is soon drawn to a shimmering, transparent morsel, which she identifies as konjac. He explains that he discovered a specialty food shop on the first floor of the same building where they purchased the boxes, which offered a variety of unique ingredients that caught his curiosity. He further describes the dish as a tea olive compote he attempted to solidify using agar as an experiment. Though he tells her she is welcome to set it aside if it isn't to her liking, she stubbornly insists on trying every bit of the meal he prepared, showing her appreciation for his effort. She takes a bite of the experimental dish, her eyes closing in delight as the floral scent of the tea olives fills her senses. She remarks on the wonderful fragrance, savoring the unique flavor Akira created. Suddenly, he leans in and kisses her, a bold and unexpected gesture that leaves her frozen in shock. The world seems to stop as he closes the distance between them, catching her completely off guard. Breathless, she can only stammer his name as the world fades away, leaving only the warmth of his presence and the frantic beating of her heart. The intimacy of the moment is overwhelming, her cheeks flushing a deep crimson. He pulls back just enough to look into her eyes, his voice a low murmur as he agrees that the scent is indeed pleasant. The sheer intensity of his gaze leaves her head spinning, her thoughts dissolving into a dizzying whirl of confusion and excitement. As they sit together in the quiet aftermath, she tries to hide her burning face behind her bento, overwhelmed by the sudden intimacy. Meanwhile, he reflects on the gift he couldn't find, a tea olive-scented lipstick, and why he chose to make the compote instead. His mind drifts back to the store where he had searched for it, wanting to find the perfect way to capture the essence of the season for her. He had looked through the shelves, but nothing seemed quite right. Instead, he had taken matters into his own hands, crafting the compote himself to ensure the fragrance was just right. He held the jar, knowing that a handmade gift would carry more meaning. Seeing her radiant smile and the sparkle in her eyes as she continues to eat, he knows he made the right choice. The image of her happiness was the only inspiration he ever needed to create his dish of the day.